The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Tuesday, October 23rd, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Khashoggi body parts supposedly found in the Saudi embassy in Istanbul as Erdogan says the whole thing was planned. Meanwhile, Republicans need a caravan just to carry their lies. And it's 13 days until Election Day, though polls and early voting numbers start to come in. Meanwhile, in New Hampshire, voting restrictions struck. In Georgia, voting restrictions working overtime. Supreme Court shields Wilbur Ross from testifying about the census's attack on immigrants. And the Bible Museum in Washington conned, proving there's no trust amongst grifters. And the Trump administration continues its assault on health care. And 3 Proud Boys are arrested and charged for assault in New York. And meanwhile, Trump administration starts to attack trans rights. And a bomb is found in George Soros's mailbox. Happy Tuesday, everyone. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Yes, folks, back from the West Coast, Brendan and I were out there this weekend for Politicon, which I saw John Fugelsang there, and he had the best description of it for me. He said, it's like Comic-Con, but with a lot less integrity. And he was right. It was a bit of a freak show. I mean, it was nice. There were plenty of fans out there of the Majority Report and of TMBS and Antifada and of course Literary Hangover, which was nice to connect with some of those people. It was also super creepy to be walking around and seeing Bill Kristol walk by, or Ann Coulter, or some guy wearing a 3-cornered hat, wearing a full Patriots outfit and not being for the Patriots, the football team. I mean, if you dress up like that as a mascot, that's okay. I mean, theoretically, right? You're getting paid for it, and it's tongue in cheek. But there was a lot of that in it, but it's very creepy to be walking around. I don't like, walking around folks like Bill Kristol. I mean, if he, obviously he needs to walk and he's allowed to walk, but
he's ambulatory.
Yeah, there's like there's an expectation and I don't, I don't put the people who work on the conference on the spot. They're just volunteers. But when they're like, "Oh, do you want to say hello?" and I'm like, "Absolutely not. No,
Wait,
actually."
People volunteer to work at this thing?
Well, I don't know if they're volunteers. I don't think they're volunteers, but they're just people who go to work. I don't think they do it for free. No, I think they get paid.
I was
but
gonna
mean,
say.
but I mean, like they're people. They don't work for the venue. I think they work different. I was talking to somebody who was like, I wasn't going to do this one, then I decided to do it, and so volunteer is the wrong word.
I was gonna ask who pays to go to this thing.
A lot of people. I don't know, and but it was strange. The whole thing was strange. We did 2 panels. One was on Mike Pence, and it was really not so much on Mike Pence as much as, or directly on Mike Pence, as much as it was on the question of like, would it be worse to have Mike Pence as VP? And actually, our guest from on Monday's show, the pre-recorded, Anand Giridharadas was on that panel. Elise Jordan, who had worked for Condi Rice and now actually makes a point of saying that she no longer identifies as a Republican, and the author of a biography on Mike Pence. And he was interesting. We may have him on. Mike Pence is a sort of a terrifying figure. According to his biographer, he is the most powerful. He is the I want to say he is the theocrat who has attained more power in America than any other theocrat in the country. Or he's the most theocratic person to attain that type of power. I mean, he's full-on theocrat. And I think I knew that, but I didn't hear it quite as explicitly. And that was actually an interesting conversation, I think. And we had another one, the Should We Be Socialist panel, that had no socialists on it. And I think
What'd you decide?
Well, the interesting thing is that there was nobody arguing for, because there was no socialists on the panel. No one came out and said we should be socialists. I think this panel is going to be running on C-SPAN at one point, but the argument sort of broke down more into sort of like tactics. And I feel like it was an interesting crew of people, Bakari Sellers, Marcus Malitzis, Kyle Kalinske, David Pachman, and Anna Kasparian. And much of it sort of fell along the lines of tactics. And, should Joe Manchin, I don't know what there was. Should Joe Manchin, everybody agreed that Joe Manchin should be primaried. But then after that, there was some other sort of like, we need to get rid of Joe Manchin. And then it was unclear to me how that would happen outside of a primary. But there was a lot of that, which is not to say that people were defending Joe Manchin. But I think the argument was in terms of, well, I don't know. I don't know what the argument was really. I mean, and I was the moderator, so that was I did my best. But it was interesting nevertheless, and there was a lot of people there. And Kyle Kalinske had a huge fan contingency there. And then on Sunday, I debated Charlie Kirk from Turning Points USA, and you guys played the clip of him freaking out with
Jank.
With Jank.
We also played him demand the banking one.
Okay, so later in the program, probably in the fun half, I think we're going to do the whole debate at an accelerated speed, like literally run the debate at like 1.3 times speed. But we'll do some running commentary, like a DVD extra. I will say this, though, just to give you a sense. So the only thing I saw that debate, I mean, I think we saw like 5 minutes of the debate with Hassan Piker, which is where actually Charlie lost it with Jank, I guess, in the question answer period. But that was the only clip that I had really seen because it was on Twitter. And so and we had a fan sent me a link, and it's not hard to find, a link to the Turning Points USA tax filings. And it's a 990 form, and you can see it for the whole years. And so I had some notes, And they were just basically, things to remember to bring up. And I probably should have organized them different because there were some things I forgot. But on the outside of these notes, I wrote TPUSA 990 forum.
You're such a
and
pest.
990A. And I don't know if during the debate you can see I'm like flashing it like this. And before the debate, when when we met Charlie, I asked him about it. I said, "Yeah, I heard you got into a big squabble yesterday with Jank," and he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Was it about your pay or something like that?" And he said, "Yeah, we were talking about pay." And then I go, because I looked up your tax filings, and it's pretty amazing. $4 million budget. You can only make $27,000 a year. And he's like, "Yep." And I was like, "For 65 hours a week, huh? Boy, you should see somebody about a raise." And then he's like, "Well, actually, no, it's more now." And I said, "Oh, so you got a raise this year?" And he goes, Yeah. And he goes, in 2017, it was $49,000. And I'm like, "Well, that's not what it says in your 990. He's like, "Yeah, I should talk to my accountant." I'm like, "Yeah, you should." And then I said, "And I also noticed that your shipping, your postage, is $250,000 a year. That's a lot of money on postage." He's like, "Yeah, we send out a lot of kits to colleges." I'm like, "Oh." And $1.1 million for travel? I do think, it probably would be a bit of a favor for Charlie on some level, because it sounds like his accountant may have messed up on that pay thing. Maybe I looked at it wrong, but I was pretty sure it was the 2017 990. And you can ask for more audited expenses. I think that's public because it is a tax-exempt organization, because they don't do any campaigning, supposedly. And so it was fun just telling him that he should probably get his accounting done. But that was all behind the scenes stuff. And I was just joking around with the guy, and he's very well behaved off stage.
Leave it on the field.
Totally leave it on the field. And so we will go through the debate later.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that should be fun. I'll give you a sense of what I was thinking. And I have to say, I don't know if people have seen it and they may skip our assessment of it, but I would say I give myself a B+. I feel like there's a couple of things I could have done better, and then there are things I could have done, would have had to have hit like a grand slam. So, minus the grand slam, and there was a couple of points I think I could have done a little better. But overall, I think I did fairly well. And I think it's, this is someone clipped this. This was a fun part. So there was a segment during the debate, and it was this the bank. I don't know what
this is in the banking.
Yeah. There were a couple of places during the debate. We'll go through this in real time, but Charlie seemed to be a little bit confused about how banks make money. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the reason why Republicans ostensibly want to get rid of it is because it's too independent, because Congress does not fund it. So they can't inhibit its operations by cutting its funds, which is what the Republicans want to do, because its funds were set up in such a way to insulate it from those kind of attacks by lawmakers who may want to help out the big banks. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and I got this number wrong during by a factor of 10. Since 2011, really, I guess for 5 years after that, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau saved consumers almost $13 billion, billions with a B. And the funding to operate the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau comes from fees paid by banks, not unlike the FDIC, which is, which is basically depositor insurance. Federal government backstops it, but there's some fees associated with it. And the way a bank makes money is they loan out money at an interest rate higher than the interest rate they give their depositors. There's that arbitrage, and they make that money in between. Often a bank will loan out even more money than they have, but there are capital requirements that the U.S. government insists upon so that you don't loan out too much money that you don't have. Nevertheless, those fees are paid by the profits the banks make. The delta between what they pay out in interest and what they take in interest. Charlie didn't seem to have a really tight grip on that.
Money doesn't just sit there in the bank, Sam.
So somebody took a small clip of that audio.
This is Lizard Rumsfeld again.
Lizard Rumsfeld.
Lizard Rumsfeld's a key player on Twitter.
Yeah, this is pretty good. And as you know, or may not know, I play Hugo on the show Bob's Burgers. And here's a scene that Lizard Rumsfeld took the audio and put it into a scene with Hugo and Bob.
What is the budget? It is completely funded by fees that they get from the bank.
Okay, so forcibly take money.
He went on to say forcibly take money from depositors, which is not actually how that works.
That is really good.
Love it.
Oh, folks, do you escape? We just got our box today, incidentally. Do you love the thrill of an escape room? I don't know if you've ever been to an escape room. I have not. I want to, though. This is high on my list. Where you are looking for clues and solving puzzles. Well, now you can bring the mystery home with Hunt a Killer. Hunt a Killer is a monthly subscription where you become a detective immersed in a murder mystery. Each month, a fictional serial killer will send you cryptic clues, objects, and letters that you can actually use to solve the crime in real time. This may be something I actually could do with Mila. This might be fun, actually. To do with your kid, if they're old enough. I don't feel like I would do it with a 5-year-old. I feel like that might be a little scary. It's so interactive that it feels real. Perfect to play solo, on a date, for a game night with friends, or join their online community and work with other people who are at the same point in the story as you are. We just got the box. Literally, it showed up today. And I'm going to take this home. I'm pretty excited to do this, actually. I don't get a lot of opportunity to do fun things. Right now, just for our listeners, you can go to huntakiller.com/majority for 10% off your first box. They only accept 200 members per day, so hurry to take advantage of this offer. That's huntakiller.com/majority for 10% off your first box. huntakiller.com/majority. Check it out. Also, today's show gets support from Third Love. Third Love is a company that uses millions of real women's measurements. Third Love designs its bras with breast size and shape in mind for an impeccable fit and incredible feel. They got cups from A through H and bands up to 48. Third Love offers double the number of sizes that most other brands offer. Plus, their bras feature tagless labels, meaning no itching. That seems to me to be obvious. Do all bras not do that?
No, most bras have itchy labels.
Oh my God, that's ridiculous. They have straps that won't slip. They're lightweight, super thin memory foam cups, and an ultra soft smoothing fabrics. Check out the new Cotton collection, which was created as a result of customer requests for especially soft, breathable bras and underwear you'll want to wear every day. And remember, if for some reason you don't love their product, returns and exchanges are free and easy. Now, folks, I don't wear bras. And so I had a friend check some of these out. This is what she wrote. And she's extremely fashion conscious. Okay, she says, I like that they don't have a zillion options, so it's easy to choose something quickly. The fit is great. I usually have to return most bras I order online, even though they're in my size. I ordered 2 and both fit. That almost never happens. Super comfortable for an everyday bra, but not as boring as most t-shirt bras. What are t-shirt bras?
It's like a plain, seamless bra you wear under a t-shirt. Doesn't show through.
And she also wrote, there are subtle, cute details, so I don't feel basic. So there you go. Fashionable, comfortable. Size is correct. What's that?
Do you need any help with that?
Jesus, Michael.
The first read. Callback, Sam. That's all you.
Oh. Third Love knows there's a perfect bra for everyone. So right now they're offering my listeners 15% off your first order. Go to thirdlove.com/majority now to find your perfect fitting bra. Get 15% off your first purchase. Go check it out. This is it would be great to find a place that you could regularly buy your bras that fit. That's thirdlove.com/majority for 15% off today. All right. So the Republicans, like I said at the top of the show, we're 13 days away from the midterms. In many places, you can vote early. And if you have any sense that you're going to be out of town, get your absentee ballots in. As you know, I vote up in the 19th district in New York. This is where Antonio Delgado is running against Faso. My understanding, brief conversation with a Democratic election official up there, a lot of absentee ballots, which is a very good sign. And there's very high numbers for early voting. Republicans are coming out. I mean, keep in mind that on some of these special elections, we saw Republicans come out in higher numbers than they normally do, as well as Democrats. Democrats just came out with a little bit more higher numbers. So voting is going to be key. They have been activated in many respects by anti-immigrant policies. I mean, right now you see there is a reason why Donald Trump is talking about this caravan, and we'll talk about it, of Central American, essentially families, crossing through Mexico at this time with the hopes of getting into this country, maybe even some hopes of getting asylum in Mexico as well. But here is Donald Trump at a rally. Where was this rally last night? Houston. This is in Houston. Very well attended, is my understanding. This is the one where I think Ted Cruz went and did the sort of simian thing where he held his hand out like this, and but
bowed down to Trump.
Here's Donald Trump. Listen, you can't go up in front of a national audience and say, hey, we're going to put it to the Jews. But you can do this.
Radical Democrats want to turn back the clock toward the rule of corrupt, power-hungry globalists. You know what a globalist is, right? You know what a globalist is. A globalist is a person that wants the globe to do well, frankly, not caring about our country so much. And you know what? We can't have that. You know, they have a word. It sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist. Nationalist. Nothing. Use that word. Use that word.
Now, I mean, Donald Trump, it's unclear to me that there are any policies that he's pursued that have been, ones that you could call nationalist. I mean, Donald Trump is for the most part, I would say
he's got the tariffs, right?
What I was going to say, for the most part, functioning as a typical Republican, with the two exceptions of one, his foreign policy is slightly differently aligned, probably more tracking his own investments, like literally his own personal investments in some fashion. And then the other one is the tariffs. Now, the tariffs, I don't know how you would call that a nationalist policy. It is hurting American businesses. And there are some American businesses it's helping. There are a couple of massive steel conglomerates who are coincidentally also big supporters of his, that it is helping. But farmers are suffering under the retaliation on those tariffs. You have Chrysler going to be laying off a significant percentage of its employees because of the tariffs. And
well, they're nationalists. Just because they don't work that well doesn't mean they're not nationalist in their orientation.
Well, like I say, aside from those policies, they're nationalist. But if there's other policies you can find that are nationalist, I'd be open to it. But he's
he's essentially a neoliberal still.
Yes.
The right wing of neoliberalism.
Yeah, like I say, typical Republican policies. And
he is a Republican. That's why he's the leader of the Republican Party. That's why he's enormously popular with Republicans, and that's why he's the same as congressional Republicans.
But the point is that he's just a liar. And so, I mean, he calls himself a nationalist not because it's aligned with any type of policy prescriptions, as much as it is one in which it's easier to embrace that than to say, like, we're going to really stick it to the brown people. And
read between the lines.
Yes. You know who else was a nationalist? But
I'm a nationalist, okay? People don't like the word.
And regular people, Republicans, have been so trained to think like, well, not all nationalism is bad just because liberals are going to freak out in the negative against it, right?
Well, and also, like, we know how globalists have been used by the right, right? I mean, it means one thing for the left, and it means another thing for the right.
It doesn't just mean Jews, though.
Well, like I say, it means
globalization is a real thing.
What I said was it means one thing for the right and another thing for the left. Do you disagree with that?
I think it means what it means, no?
Well,
there's like a dog whistle element to it, certainly.
Thank you.
There's an anti-Semitic element. I think some of it is what we would call structural anti-Semitism, which is not like literal hatred of Jews, but this more esoteric thing that Moshe Postone wrote about, where Jews came to represent the hidden parts of capital, which was why National Socialists, quote unquote.
So let me ask you this. When he uses it, what do you think he means?
I think he's talking about economic nationalism.
He means it in the esoteric sense, where Jews become a performative machinery of capitalism, Samantha. So in other words, the Jew.
All right. Well, we will agree to disagree on this.
Can you snap third love bras off with one finger?
I think when Donald Trump uses the term globalist, he is trying to trigger in the right-wing lizard brain the way that it's used in right-wing circles, which is to mean a cabal of people who are trying, in the same way that the John Birch Society has used it, the 100-year tradition, 75-year tradition that has been used on the right to imply that there is a cabal with Jews and Jew-friendly people and who are trying to create a one-world government that is going to. It's part of the reason why the UN is a problem, part of the reason why all multicultural politics are a problem. I mean, I think that's what it signifies. Now, it's possible there are people who have a more nuanced take on that when they hear Donald Trump and they're cheering for him. That's possible. because anything's possible. And maybe I'm talking too broad of a thing, but that is pretty much what I'm convinced that he's trying to do there. I don't think it's a coincidence that he's introducing this concept at a time where he's also saying that there are hordes of brown people who are coming to invade this country. I don't think that's a coincidence. Some people might think it's a coincidence.
I think he's talking about the immigrants more than he's talking about Jews.
Thank you. Okay. And who do you think they have said paid for that immigrant throng? A big Jew who just had a bomb put in his mailbox. So I think he knows.
Left.
Right.
Smearing the right.
I think, I mean, you could. I'm not sure what.
Trump is discussing symbolic categories, and you're smearing him.
Yeah,
Samantha.
I guess so. Is that the argument? Do you think I'm smearing? Do you think I'm maligning Donald Trump by saying this stuff?
No.
Okay.
Globe emoji. Globe emoji. Globe emoji.
Exactly.
I'm just saying it has two meanings.
Well, that's what I meant when I said it has one meaning on the right and one meaning on the left.
Well, wait. I'm going to get a little pedantic here. I'm sorry. It has critiques of globalization have two meanings. Nobody on the left says globalist. Globalist is a right-wing term.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to where Trump wants reporters to embed themselves in this migrant caravan to find all the despicable people amongst these families. Now, you can take that in two ways. Maybe. I don't think you could.
There's a lot of people representing symbolic capital in those caravans.
Exactly.
It's a big problem.
Exactly. Listen, this is a nuanced perspective I have about this caravan.
I'm not going to argue on this one.
Thank you. Here is Donald Trump asking reporters to please go down there and do the work, which, incidentally, they've done. There have been many, many reports of people interviewing these people who are coming in this caravan. And why are you coming? Oh, because Honduras is overrun by criminals and it's extremely dangerous for my family and I can't make any money and I'm afraid for our lives. In fact, the whole reason why people are traveling in a caravan is not because they think that somehow, they're going to swing their 4-year-olds at the Americans when they get there and overrun the country.
They're going to use them as human shields,
right,
Sam.
Right. It's because they are afraid of traveling alone. It's because they don't have the money to pay for smugglers and are afraid of those people, and they think that there is strength in a larger group. And so Donald Trump is asking people to go down there and embed themselves in it. And let's listen to him as he gets off the plane.
There are terrorists part of this caravan. You know what you should do, John? Go into the middle of the caravan, take your cameras and search. Okay? Take your camera, go into the middle and search. You're going to find MS-13, you're going to find Middle Eastern, you're going to find everything. And guess what? We're not allowing them in our country. We want change.
You're also going to find a lot of symbolic capital which is disengaged from the
But here you're going to find Middle Eastern, whatever that means. You're going to find Middle Eastern and MS-13 in the middle there. So, I mean, the idea is that somehow this caravan, they think these people from Honduras think it's in their best interest to hide Middle Eastern terrorists and or you have thousands of people traveling together because they're afraid for their lives and they're, I guess, supposedly protecting MS-13 in there.
What happens is that first MS-13 protects the people that are fleeing MS-13, and then MS-13 is scared, so they bring in Hamas to protect them. And then Al-Qaeda comes.
When does North Korea get involved?
Here is...
but not anymore because Trump negotiated it.
Here's a piece from the Times. Do you have this tweet, Matt? Brenda, will you send it to Matt? This is a clip from... the New York Times, a piece they had written yesterday. And it is about the perspective that this triggers in the right-wing brain. And do you have it? It is a clip that reads, "But Mr. Trump's dystopian imagery." Mr. Trump's dystopian imagery has clearly left an impression with some. Carol Shields, 75, a Republican in northern Minnesota, said she was afraid that migrant gangs could take over people's summer lake homes in the state. "What's to stop them?" said Ms. Shields, a retired accountant. "We have a lot of people who live on lakes in the summer and winter someplace else. When they come back in the spring, their house could be occupied."
That's a great point.
I mean, so there are people who are susceptible to all sorts of imagery, and it's effective in some respects because there's a tremendous amount of ignorance out there, particularly amongst, white people who are living outside of areas where they have some type of interaction with people who are not exactly like them. Here is Mike Pence. He is being asked by Robert Costa on the Washington Post live show, I guess, about this caravan. And here is the lie that Mike Pence tries to push.
Just to finish on the midterms, you're going to be heading out on the campaign trail soon.
I am.
Immigration's become a major issue. The president keeps talking about this migrant caravan, and he references Middle Easterners that are part of this caravan without evidence. Why is that, and where is the evidence, if any?
Well, it's inconceivable that there are not people of Middle Eastern descent in a crowd of more than 7,000 people advancing toward our border. I mean, the truth is, well, let me the statistics.
Pause it for 1 second. Now, he wants to offer statistics. It is very conceivable that in a group of 7,000 people in Central America, and it's 4,000, I think, but let's just say 7,000 because he wants to double it, because apparently 4,000 is not scary enough for retired accountants living in a lake in Minnesota.
7,000 is enough to take over Texas.
7,000 you could take over Texas if you have enough 4-year-olds to swing around and use as human shields. But the idea that it's inconceivable that there's no Middle Eastern people in this caravan is actually pretty easy to conceive of.
Right.
And what would they do in this caravan? They're going to move freely through Mexico? They can move freely through Mexico anyways. But let's let him complete this lie, because Costas is like, what? Middle Eastern people? What is that supposed to mean?
I mean, the truth is, well, let me the statistics on this. I mean, in the last fiscal year, we apprehended more than 10 terrorists or suspected terrorists per day at our southern border from countries that are referred to in the lexicon as other than Mexico. That means from the Middle East region. I mean, the idea that they would not be in this large throng that what the president of Honduras told me was organized by leftist groups in Honduras, financed by Venezuela, and sent north to challenge our sovereignty and challenge our border.
All right. The idea. What does that mean by challenge our sovereignty? Like the idea that somehow we're going to open. All right, we give up, but you should know that, and this is a pretty big story, and I don't blame people for not being worried about this. There were 10 a day, and you notice how the media doesn't report on this at all. And it's not like they didn't get a heads up, because back in February of this very year, Mike Pence said that the government was nabbing 7 terrorists or suspected terrorists a day on the southern border. It's obviously gone up. Now, what's very strange is that no one else has reported this. No one else from the U.S. government has reported this fact. It's just Mike Pence decided to drop this. Now, maybe that's why he was so pensive, no pun intended, when he was going to answer this question, because he was not sure if he should leak this obviously very top secret information that no one else has in our government.
Well, he doesn't want ISIS to know that he knows all this.
Right.
Or like MS-13, we're like,
scroll down, because he's getting, this is on the PolitiFact, and it's pants on fire level of, and the FBI's terrorist screening center, in a fact updated in January 2017, said that a known terrorist is an individual who's been arrested, charged, or convicted in the U.S. or abroad on a crime related to terrorist or terrorist-related activities, or a person identified as a terrorist pursuant to the National Security Council resolution. And scroll down. The FBI says that they haven't gotten anywhere near those numbers. There are no data for terrorists apprehended at the border, as far as anybody could tell.
And the thing from the president of Honduras, just, because these things do kind of run in kind, the president of Honduras represents a far-right party and has been plagued by corruption allegations.
Right.
Yes. And comes from the coffee, hotel, and media sectors.
And I wonder how Venezuela is getting this money. I mean, we've seen this, like Venezuela is getting this money.
Well, that's the funny thing, is that simultaneously Venezuela is totally broke, which they actually are, but then they have all this money. I mean, yeah, the money that Venezuela is still circulating comes from like smuggling drugs through the military, and I don't think they're using it to challenge U.S. sovereignty. They're using it to...
No, they're using it for communism.
Right, by which they mean buying houses abroad for when the thing collapses.
If you scroll down here even a little bit more, there was apparently in 2016 211 people apprehended from Chad, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. And that's obviously not 7 terrorists a day. It's not even 7 people a day. It's one person a day.
Suspected terrorist is a pretty wide concept for a guy like Mike Pence.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Right. Like what Brendan just said. I mean, he could be including gay people, people who listen to music that is not, that is quote unquote ethnic at a loud volume.
But this is working. I mean, it's clearly working.
Well, you know what I said yesterday? They're returning to their core brand proposition
of
2
course.
weeks before the midterm.
Right.
Of course it's working.
Well, and that's, in part because there doesn't seem to be like enough energy left in the tank as far as the national anthem. So lastly, here is a Fox right-wing a-hole who seems to think that he is involved in some type of like wartime reporting here. I mean, he's got the whole thing. I'm surprised he's not wearing a flak jacket.
He does the hush tones.
Yes. Here we go. This is that guy Griff, who usually they send out to harass like, actors or something like that to get them to say like, how come you didn't, how come you said, America, love it or leave it or something, But here he is. Here he is. He's in the woods, folks, down at the border.
We've been hiding in the bushes, waiting to witness one of these crossings. Let's go. They're coming right now. You can see they've come in. They've got a family in a raft.
Excuse me, sir. Were you trying to cross into America illegally?
Yeah, there they are. There it is.
So what we're witnessing now
6
is
people,
a family that
3 or
was
4
being
kids.
brought over by that
One has a
smuggler
scimitar.
that was paddling in the raft. This is an attempt to illegally cross, and they've gone back over there. We've seemed to have foiled this attempt, but officials tell us that he's probably just going to look for another spot. It's a legal crossing?
Yes.
Yes? But you came anyway?
Why?
Well, why did you come? Is what I'm asking you. Can you tell me why you came illegally?
The situation of Honduras.
You're in Honduras? You're from Honduras?
Yes.
What are the conditions there?
You could not have work in there because the criminals always will get your money.
Yeah. I wonder if Griff speaks Spanish. I mean, what like the idea of like actually sending somebody down who could actually communicate to these people in some fashion. Very fortunate for Griff that this Honduran speaks 2 languages, and because I don't know
more languages than he does.
Right, exactly.
It's crazy that he thinks that he comes off well in this.
Does for their people.
For their people, I think they do. They're not as
people who are
nuanced.
completely divorced from any type of basic human empathy.
Like, you have to be pretty far gone to watch that and listen to what she said and think that these people are like scary terrorists.
You have to be pretty far gone could be the description of the Fox News viewing base. But you know what? This is another thing that Tucker Carlson does that's intelligent. He'll say a lot and very manipulative. He says a lot. Conditions in many countries are horrible, and that's not a good thing. And you should feel bad about it. And maybe you should even do something about it. But it's not our political responsibility. That's how you offload a ping of conscience.
Right. And, I mean, of course, it's not hard to make the argument that it is, in fact, our political responsibility.
Well, of course, that's the other conclusion. You could draw a map of, I mean, even MS-13 was literally created in Latin America or in LA, migrated back to Latin America, and had a lot to do with what Reagan was doing in Central America in the 80s, which was absolutely vicious.
Right. And we destabilized a lot of these countries, supported coups in these countries. Our drug policies have encouraged all sorts of cartels. So it's easy to find a political responsibility.
You could do a
you're
heat
inclined.
map, probably.
Yeah.
Of every single place that has an immigration crisis, you could link whether it's World Bank, IMF policies or the coups, things you're talking about. You could probably draw linear relationships between U.S. foreign policy and certainly anywhere in the Caribbean or Latin America.
And one thing that did not come up in the context of the debate, which I lament, was the implications of immigration on things like wages in this country. And since it didn't come up in the debate, I guess I'll drop this now. But the vast majority of studies show, and to the extent that there are studies that are contrary to this, they've been debunked by some, in some instances, by right-wing think tanks, that immigrant labor largely does not substitute one-to-one for American native labor. And there is as much data that argues that if you were to restrict immigration, particularly for immigrant labor when it comes to things like farm work, that you would end up getting far more automation, which would ultimately knock out native workers as well. Additionally, apparently restricting immigration can have adverse effects for high skilled labor, in that immigrant labor provides domestic services which allow, many instances, mothers, some instances, fathers, to return to the workforce earlier because they are given, because they have childcare. None of this has to be undocumented. You could have all these people documented and they could still function in the same way. It may raise some prices a little bit, but the market for nannies, I think, is, a function of demand in a certain area. And certainly with migrant workers, it would be nice to bring them into the system so that they could get protection in terms of wages. But there's simply no data to support that they have a significant impact on lowering wages. And then on top of that, we are aging out the white population in this country, the native population, is getting old. And we need more workers to support our society, like things like Social Security.
I mean, this is even more extreme in the UK.
And it's actually a big problem in China as well.
Right.
I mean, it's one of our competitive advantages is that we have.
Well, that's how Japan actually undercut their boom.
There you go.
Negative population
Here's
growth.
the thing, though. Like, I don't like to argue on their terms about this stuff. Like, whether immigrants are good for the economy or whether in some sectors they have been used in the past to break unions and drive down wages. That's not how I decide what rights people have, you know? So, like, humans have the right to freedom of movement. And if the system cannot support that, then the system needs to change, period.
I mean, that's I don't have a problem with that argument, but I'm addressing to the extent that there's an argument out there that wages, particularly in the context of a middle-class debate, what hurts the middle class, that immigrants present some type of threat. There is, I think, obviously another argument that we should have no borders, or that people should have the rights to migrate wherever they want.
But those are kind of different things, right? Like I'm just
that's
saying,
right.
Just
Exactly.
what I'm saying. It's like it's one thing when people say, you know, we should support immigrants because they do X, X, and X, which I agree with you because I think there's innate values at work. And it's another to just say you're literally lying about what they're doing here.
Yeah, exactly. I'm addressing the arguments of the woman who owns the lake house, who thinks that migrant hordes are going to take over her house. I'm addressing the arguments that we hear from people who may not subscribe to the idea that we shouldn't have borders, that there is some type of material harm that is being done to American citizens or American workers by immigrants. And my argument is that's not the case. Now, yes, you can take undocumented or even documented immigrants and use them and leverage them
This
against.
has happened.
Yes, I know. You can do that. You can do that with scabs too. I mean, who don't necessarily have to be undocumented. And I'm not even sure that it's, sort of maybe easier to manipulate immigrant populations than not, if that's the argument that you're making.
Or other economically marginalized populations.
Right. I mean, so maybe it's not a good idea to say that they are. I mean, you tell me. Do you think immigrants are more easily manipulated than others to break unions?
I mean, it's happened in the past. It's happened with immigrants. It's happened with other marginalized populations.
Well,
by bosses who want to pay people less.
Do you think that they're more susceptible to it?
I mean, yeah, if you can threaten to call ICE on somebody, of course.
Right. And so, I mean, I think that's a problem. But that's why I think we should be brought in to legalize them in this instance. But that is, I don't think that the right is concerned about their negative effects against unions.
No, of course not. It's pretty disingenuous on their part. But
that
you also,
the
when
point
they're
of what I was
making
saying.
a material argument, like, I like it that you're arguing with them on that level, I guess. But yeah, you need to deal with the material facts at hand. And in the past, like, yeah, there have been benefits to our economy, and there have been bad things too. Bosses have abused marginalized populations and used them to drive down wages. But the answer to that is to always incorporate everyone into your worker struggle.
Yes. All right. Well, look, we got to take a break, head into the fun half, and then we're going to go in. We're going to do a rundown of the debate. We will do the debate at 1.3, 1.275.
We'll go about 1.2, 1.3. See how it feels.
He's just like, Matt talks about speed the same way
Yeah.
a really confident airline pilot is
Yeah.
like, we're about 30,000 feet. We're going to be hitting a little bit of turbulence, so you just sit
I
back,
think what
put
we're
on
going to
your
try to do is
seatbelt
we're
back.
going to probably bring that up to 45,000 feet. We'll see if we can fly over those, and then we'll drop back down. Depending on the tailwinds we get, we may get you there a little bit early today. So sit back.
You may actually find that you actually absorb the information a little bit better at just a heightened speed of another 0.2. So just sit back, listen to Charlie Kirk's talking points and Sam Seder's debunk. I think we all have a pleasant flight and enjoy the fun half of the show.
Just wanted to let you know the Wi-Fi is out today. All right, folks, quick break, and then we'll head into the fun half. Don't forget, you can support this show by becoming a member. Go to jointhemajorityreport.com, jointhemajorityreport.com for just pennies a day. You could become a member and support this program. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, and chocolate. You get the Majority Report blend if you want there. You can get other blends, too. They've got a bunch of different coffees. It is the official coffee of the Majority Report. Today is Tuesday. That means that the Michael Brooks Show is happening. Michael?
We are doing a deep dive on the Madragon Collective in Spain, workers' cooperatives, and how Jeremy Corbyn has a concrete policy proposal on actually transitioning enterprises to workers-owned enterprises in the UK, which is interesting. And then Brian Mayer from Brazil Wire is going to talk about this new, basically reporting that there was actually a giant illegal slush fund that bought people's WhatsApp information and spread fake news in the Brazilian election, and the Supreme Court's reviewing it, and there's a very tiny outsized chance that the election might be annulled.
Wow.
We'll talk about that, and of course, we're on the anniversary of the political imprisonment of Lula, so a whole bunch of other stuff, patreon.com/TMBS.
And Jamie on the Antifada?
Yeah, so this week we had on two guests, one of whom was the editor-in-chief of Commune magazine, which is a cool new leftist-leaning magazine, to talk about his media project. We had our friend Andy Battle, who writes for the magazine, talk about his piece on why the New York subways suck so bad, what it means for public transit all over the place, and the public transit and freedom of movement in general as a potential site of struggle between competing visions, one of transit as a human right and a public space for public good, and the other as a space for capital accumulation. So we had a really good talk about that. And then we went into some of our utopian visions for transit in the future in a post-capitalist society, and that's a bonus.
Matt.
Yeah, I did a very non-fiction version of the literary hangover this time. The Mystic Massacre and the Pequot War. It's a sort of first textbook genocide of New England. Check it out. Literary Hangover, or patreon.com/literary hangover. And check it out on YouTube. Actually, that episode isn't up on YouTube yet. So you're going to have to go to the podcast.
Just keep looking for it.
Yeah.
Also, thank you to Margie Gomez, who I don't know if a listener who sent us all sorts of apples. It's like a apple fest in here. Fall festival. Nice. Thanks again. All right, folks, quick break. Head into the fun half. See you there, 646-257-3920. Oh. We had, one more.
You have that still?
Yeah, wait a second.
Have it.
Shoot. Bear with me 1 second. Oh, yeah, folks, before we go. Hunt a Killer. Don't forget, it's a monthly subscription that sends you cryptic clues, objects, and letters so you can solve a crime in real time. It's so interactive that it feels real. We just got the box. Super excited. This is what's going to bring Mila and I together. Honestly, if this is the one thing that can get her to talk to me at age 13, this is going to be huge. Right now, just for our listeners, you can go to huntakiller.com/majority for 10% off your first box. They only accept 200 members per day, so hurry up to take advantage of this offer. That's huntakiller.com/majority for 10% off your first box. huntakiller.com/majority. Folks, if you start playing, let us know how it's going. I want to hear different people's reactions to this because I think it's pretty fun stuff. That's huntakiller.com/majority. See you in the fun half. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. We'll take 1 IM and then 1 Skype, and then we'll go into the debate. Midwest Mike, Sam, the thing about the lady scared that brown folks would invade her lake house rings true. My parents had summer home in the Ozarks, and when I was a kid, it was a tradition for Dad to go down a few days before Memorial Day to get it ready for the holiday. The joke was always, if I don't come back in 3 days, call immigration. I guess it was because my dad was worried there'd be Mexicans holed up in the house. Anyways, I never thought it was funny until one year Mom and the kids left early to meet Dad at the lake, only to find him flitting about the house with a man named Caesar in what looked like a scene from the Birdcage. My parents sold the house that fall. Oh, my God. Chief, hey, Sam, I love the product idea, Hunt a Killer. I was thinking of creating my own version where I send out clues and letters to a schizophrenic-only clientele leading to... Oh, that's not funny. Larson, curious, have you read the NY Times piece about Eric Prince and his secret private army in the UAE? Also, there's a Reuters War College podcast episode covering his proposal to create a private air force, privatize the Afghan war. And I sent you a fan piece a while back. Wonder if you saw it. Not sure. A Square, last one. Good discussion yesterday, Mike. Brenda, thanks for calling and reminding us that, yes, the attempts to strip the transgender community of their personhood and humanity is not only scary and disgraceful, it's the continuation of dehumanization, otherness, brown people, Latinos, blacks, the Jews, Muslims, feminists. If we are not human, we all we know how this ends. I'm scared that racism will win on November 6th. Racism is the constant in American history and preceded capitalism. It's the thing unto itself. Like a virus, durable and intractable, nevertheless, we fight. Jamie has a problem with that.
Okay. That's just not true. Race, modern concepts of race and racism arose from a material set of conditions in history. And I know it's hard to imagine because it's so pervasive now and it just seems like the way things are. But if you view racism as a trans-historical evil that lurks in the hearts of man, you can't do anything about it.
That's not what that person or I was saying. I think I will.
No, that's not what you were saying.
Well, I think this is what I think the distinction is. Like, I think you have to take a Marxist analysis of racism. I think that's fruitful. But I think when you insert capitalism as what produced race, like, I agree with you that scientific racism emerged from. It did. I mean, I was reading Ibram Kendi's book on Stamped from the Beginning on race, and it preceded capitalism. It just did.
Disagree.
There's no real contradiction here. From
it was a dialectic.
Even in terms of Adolf Reed, who do agree with, and Marxist reading, but there are different brands of racism, but there's obviously forms of racism going back to literally even like Romans taking slaves.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't. And
I'm talking about the way we have it now.
Practical matter. Look. If the really narrow point is that it's something metaphysical that we could never overcome, I think that that's important to disagree with and debate.
Me too.
But
yeah, that's the most important takeaway.
Yeah, but conversely, like picking apart all the different ways it's formed can get, I think too abstracted, especially from like where that perspective of the IM is coming from, which is like, yes, in a very real historical and political level, it's like Ronnie Kasrils. I'll quote that again. He was a South African militant revolutionary. He fought to overcome apartheid. He said the origins of where apartheid came from go back to imperialism, colonialism, where you have to build race narratives to justify going in and murdering and raping people and stealing their shit. And as it emerged, it very much became in a Gramscian sense, which actually sounds pretentious, but it's simple, just that there's cultural institutions that go along with the economics and the politics, and they feed each other.
Yeah,
and so we're playing all this stuff
I
at once.
agree with that. That's what I was saying.
Well, no, I mean, we were splitting hairs, but I think like capitalism and race emerged at the same time from the same milieu.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying.
And they affected one another.
I am not disagreeing. I've not disagreed with that at any point. I'm saying that to say capitalism preceded and formed racism will strike people as ahistorical because they came out of the same milieu.
Yeah.
We had a pedantic argument about this on Twitter last night. I think we're mostly in agreement. The most important takeaway for me is that these concepts don't just come from nowhere. It came from a set of material conditions in history. Humans have not always had these concepts, and perhaps we don't always have to have them in the future.
Well, I'm pretty sure humans have always had the concept that that the concept of these other people who have the thing that we want are less than us. And that, I think, is necessary.
Which came first, wanting their stuff or deciding that they were inferior?
I would say probably they arrived around the exact same time. But maybe they wanted their stuff a moment earlier, but that's not capitalism.
But wanting the other people's stuff preceded capitalism.
Sure. I don't know if we're going to resolve this right now.
But I think we just did.
The idea, no, like slavery existed in different forms.
Listen, I honestly don't want to argue that capitalism preceded human greed. Okay?
No, certainly.
Okay. That's all that anybody's saying.
But
that is all anyone is saying. That's all that's being said, is that the desire to take other people's stuff and the subsequent rationales behind that. I'm sure there are some people who just started with I don't like those people, even though I don't want their stuff. They're less than me. But to the extent that creating someone as being less than human than them because they wanted their stuff. And I don't know the answer which preceded which there, but I'll just even stipulate that the desire to have their stuff was what preceded their deciding that they were less than. The human desire to have other people's stuff existed long before capitalism. And if we can agree on that, then we don't need to argue this anymore. All right, let me go to the phone. Calling from John from San Antonio. John, what's on your mind? Is that you, John?
Good afternoon, Sam.
Calling from a 210?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Thank you.
Good. That's what I assumed.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
What's up?
Okay. When asked who's better at handling the economy in the latest NBC poll, Republicans had a 43-28 lead. So you're probably right about debating Charlie Kirk on Trump's economy, but you would have probably dominated him on cultural issues also. I've completed my most thorough listing for the most flippable districts, and I want to talk a little bit about the different layers of the highest percentage of flipping these districts. 5 of the 6 top of the top most flippable districts are occurring in Pennsylvania, thanks to the great work by the activists there, who questioned the state constitutionality of the gerrymandering there in 1. Democrats are expected to flip the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and the 17th districts, while Republicans are expected to flip the 14th district. New Jersey's 2nd district is expected to be an easy win for Democrats. From the 7th most flippable district to the 18th most flippable district, if you average the top 8 aggregators who evaluate these races in traditional states of toss-up, lean, likely, and safe, majority of these ratings give the Democrats the advantage in every race. All of the aggregators who break down these races as a percentage also have Democrats winning every race, and Democrats are leading in polling in all of these races. In Minnesota's 8th district, which is the 18th most flippable district, Democrats incumbent Rick Nolan decided to retire. Trump won this district by 16 points, and most aggregators have Republicans flipping this district. Republican Pete Stauber has a 15-point lead in the latest Siena poll. So let's see. So we're at number 19 on the most flippable district at this point, and the top 8 aggregators have the majority of the next 8 races as toss-up races, but a smaller percentage give the advantage to Democrats. An example of this is at number 19, the 6th district of Illinois, where 2 aggregators have leaned Democrat, 1 tilt Democrat, and 5 have this race as a toss-up. In most of these races, polling is very close and breaks about 50-50.
Right.
Minnesota's 1st district is currently represented by Tim Walz and has decided to run for governor. In this district, he'd flipped to Republican. 7 of the 8 top aggregators of this race had this as a toss-up, and 1 saying it's Republican. The only poll by the highly partisan Republican pollster Harper has Republican Jim Hagedorn winning by 14 points, while 538 currently has it only as a 1-point win for Hagedorn. So we're now at number 28 on the most flippable district. Let's assume Republicans win win 3 seats, they're expected to win. If Democrats win all of the other races, like many aggregators say they're going to do, they'll be at 220 seats, over the 218 they need to take the House. If you just go by polling, they'll be at 214. The next 4 races have a majority of aggregators that.
I mean, this is.
Toss-up.
I mean, it is tightened significantly, at least in terms of the polls, right? I mean, we don't know.
No,
it hasn't.
Well, I mean, there's some races that are purely tight races. Like you were talking about the 19th race, the
Right.
19th district, Antonio Delgado's, that just had a poll that came out that had a 1-point lead by Siena. Let me go ahead and just go down to it breaks it down the most. So let me just break this down. In the top 18 seats, Democrats are expected to win 16 of them fairly easily, all across the board. They say that. So all they'll need is 7 seats at that point. So in the next 26 seats are pure toss-ups.
Right. So you're saying out of those, so we need to win 7 out of 26 pure toss-ups, assuming that the polling on those first 17 are correct, to take for the Democrats to take the House.
Right. And
Okay.
it's not just one pollster. All 8 of them are saying that. Nobody's saying, like, at the edge of that are the races, let's say in Minnesota, 2nd and 3rd, where they're consistently, on average, about a 5 or 6 point lead. So,
all right.
I'm
Well,
just saying
John,
that,
I want you to do this: is to start to pick out those races that you think are going to be the sort of the indicators on election day, because we're gonna be doing our election coverage not next Tuesday, but 2 weeks from this Tuesday, and we want you to call in at least a couple of times, but certainly at the beginning of the night, to give us a sense of like where we should be looking and what could be breaking. All right,
okay.
buddy?
All right, sounds good.
Appreciate
I appreciate that.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's do the debate. Callers, I don't know how much time we're going to have. Yeah, we could. It's only going to be an hour, so we should be able to do this relatively quickly. I didn't mean to do that. All right.
Subconscious. When you're subconscious, you don't want to hear from callers.
Here is the debate. Now, I should say at the beginning of the debate that we had to submit and fill out or submit questions, like a series of questions that were supposedly going to keep the debate on track. Not only did the moderator, who seemed like a perfectly nice guy, not only did he not ask those questions, he didn't even introduce us, which was, I thought, a little bit weird. So we went right into it. But here's the debate. We're going to play the debate at 1.2 times the speed, and we'll be stopping it to correct Charlie, and to correct me, and to give some insight as to what's going on. So here is that debate.
Between Charlie Kirk and Sam Seder.
Pause it. It's Seder, not Seder. Go ahead.
So for those who don't know me, my name is Stephen Olikara. I'm the founder of a nonpartisan organization called the Millennial Action Project. I'm honored to be back at Politicon for the 4th year, and we've got a great debate for all of you discussing the middle class and whether Trump has been helpful or hurtful to the middle class, and we'll debate all of that here. My one request of the panelists is that we want to have an exchange of ideas. And so we want to focus on the substance, avoid personal attacks. And my request on behalf of the audience here is that we don't yell over each other, because then they won't be able to understand what you're saying. So are we on board with that?
Yes.
Yes.
We do.
All right. Very good. Are you all ready to get started? Okay, so again, we're here talking about the middle class, and I think perhaps the most consequential piece of
pause
legislation.
it. One thing I did notice, and the reason why we're both have handheld mics, is that I noticed in the debate that Kirk had with Hassan Piker that Hassan did not wear, had a lavalier mic, and Charlie had a handheld mic. Now, of course, you do this if you want to scream over somebody, because you can modulate your voice in a different way. And so I think I'm not exactly sure. I wasn't sure why Charlie didn't show up for the wiring of the mic, but when the guy said, "What kind of mic do you want?" I said, "I'll take what he's taking." And so we both ended up with handheld mics.
It's like a duel.
Yeah, on some level. It was like, if you want to play this handheld mic game, I will play that game too. So there's a little debate tip for you folks.
President Trump passed related to this was the tax bill last year. So I'm going to start with Sam. What was your take on the tax bill? And more broadly, do you think Trump has been helpful to the middle class?
Well, let me answer your second question first. No, I don't think he's been particularly helpful for the middle class. I don't think that across the board, I'm sure there are some measures perhaps, but across the board, net, things are not better for the middle class now, and certainly down the road they're going to be a lot worse because of policies that we've seen at least in the first 2 years of this administration. 65% of the tax cuts went to the top 20% of the country. This was, in nominal terms, the biggest tax cut for the middle class in history, or at least recent memory. But at the end of the day, if I turn Charlie's microphone up from a 5 to an 8, and mine from a 5 to a 12 or a 10, that is the dynamic that we have going here with incredible wealth inequality, middle class losing out in terms of wages versus inflation, certainly at least in the first 18 months of the Trump administration versus the last 18 months of the Obama administration, where it was basically flipped. And with increased wealth inequality, you get things like middle class being priced out of the housing market in the top 10 metropolitan areas across the country. You see it in other areas as well. So broadly speaking, at least in terms of the tax cuts, it provides some very inefficient stimulus to the economy, but no, this was for the very wealthy.
Charlie, your response. I first want to say, Sam, I think you always come about your ideas very thoughtfully, so I look forward to this discussion, sincerely. So.
Me too, thank you.
No. And so the first thing, I would come from the argument that Trump has helped the middle class, and let me build it out in a couple ways. First of all, you did say it was the largest middle class tax cut in recent memory. Now that's not saying a lot, because there hasn't been done a lot for the middle class, but let's define what exactly we mean by the middle class. The middle class, in some ways, is a uniquely American concept. The way that most people would label the middle class, and you could have your own definition, is you have the comfort to send your child to a relatively good school, and your child's life has a greater than likelihood chance that will be better than your life, that you have a median income.
Now, just pause it here. I mean, I'm not sure what the point of this was. It is a uniquely American concept insofar as in most industrialized Western countries, in fact, maybe all, the opportunity to send your kids to school and to get health care and to lead a comfortable life is basically taken for granted. It is not something that has to be aspired to or, a roll of the dice. But
it's like what makes the middle class special here is we have more of a precariat, so you feel extra good about it.
There's a chance it may not happen, so we feel good that we have those things.
Allows you to live comfortable, that you could take maybe 1 to 2 vacations a year, and that you don't have to have an insurmountable amount of debt. Now, that being said, when Americans are polled, anywhere between 70 to 90% of Americans think they're middle class, which of course only 50% of Americans are middle class. So it's really amazing to see the separation of data of how many people think they're middle class versus how many people actually are middle class.
Pause it. Now I understand what he was trying to say here. He was trying to say that those people think they're middle class, and they also think that they are living the life that Charlie uses to define the middle class. And he did this a little bit clumsily, but I see where he was going here. He's saying the concept of middle class, and you may have your own definition, Sam, and so might all those people who define themselves as middle class, may not think that, like, hey, my life allows me 2 vacations a year and I can send my kids to college, no problem. I don't have excessive debt. Because the vast majority of Americans don't get those vacations, do have the debt, worry about sending their kids and getting a good education, and they still may identify themselves as middle class because who wants to, because I know I'm not in the top 1% or 10%, but I don't want to perceive myself as being at the bottom rung of society. Now, I suppose I could have addressed that, but I only now understood his point because he didn't quite deliver that succinctly, but
the reason that I would say that is that we have an elevated standard of living in this country that goes beyond just income and goes actually that people that are earning $30,000 to $40,000 a year have access to higher quality goods that in other countries they wouldn't. But let's talk about the Trump tax cut in particular. First of all, there's a lot of demonization against corporations and against businesses. When businesses thrive, they have to employ people. And so 3.5 million jobs have been created since the start of the Trump administration. Most of those are middle-class jobs. Wages have gone up about 3.8% in the last year. They were flatlining under the Obama presidency. My favorite number...
I'm sorry, that's not true. Excuse me?
Hey,
oh,
hey, hold on. I'm running the panel
here. You
here.
can't do what you just did.
Excuse me.
Well, I'm not going to sit here and have lies about facts. Everybody has a phone. Google middle-class wages. See if they're stagnant versus inflation.
So 3.8% wage increase over the last year for the median worker. Hispanic income is at its highest level in American history at $50,000 a year. My favorite number of the Trump administration is that 3.9 million people have gone off food stamps and into the labor force. 3.9 million people. Now why is that my favorite number?
Do we know how many people are on food stamps and in the labor force? Like, I don't get that. I didn't get that.
Well, no. What he's saying is like, look, here's the thing about food stamps. Food stamps is what is known as an automatic stabilizer of the economy. When the economy has a dip, or let's say a crisis, like in 2008, more people become eligible for food stamps. It's not that the program is expanded. It's that more people, unfortunately, become eligible because their wages have disappeared and their money has gone away. And so, yes, as you get further out from this crisis, more people get more jobs. Incidentally, as long as we're talking about job creation, and this is something I probably should have brought up during the debate. There were some things I simply forgot to raise. But job creation under Barack Obama's last 20 months was higher than under the first 20 months of Donald Trump. Let me get these numbers. Here we go. 20 months. The first 20 months of the Trump administration, 3.8 million jobs. Is that what he said? 3.8 million jobs?
I think that's what he said. Yeah. Right.
In the last 20 months,
3.8%.
No. That was he's arguing wages, but he said more jobs created. In the last 20 months of the Obama administration, 4.15 million jobs were created. So job creation during the Obama years, the last 20 months, higher than the comparable amount of time that Donald Trump has been president. The wages, he has exactly opposite, although I think what he's doing is he's taking the increase in wages in a very short period of time. He's not taking it for the entire time that Trump is in office. He's taking a very isolated month to make that argument. But if you look back on the past 20 months and you look at wage increases versus inflation, it's a net loss for workers, including middle class.
For us conservatives, we do not judge success by how many people go on government programs, but instead of how many people go off into independence. Now, I will not say that our economy is at its optimal level. I think it's the best economy in a generation. You look at 4.2% GDP growth, 3.7% unemployment rate. And so if you judge...
All right, pause it. Now, again, he's looking at one quarter, and it is not... He is using a term that is for a very limited period of time. True, but worthless in terms of making an assessment as to the policies. But go ahead.
Middle class by two major things, which is standard of living increase, of which you're seeing that happen dramatically, and the second of which is education. We have a lot of work to do on the education side. I think you and I would both agree on that. We could have an extended conversation about that on policy. But the economic metrics are so good that the New York Times says, quote, "This economy is so good, we're running out of ways to critique it." And so, again, it's not a perfect economy, but for middle-class Americans that care about rising wages, creating jobs, and tax cuts, the average American family had a $2,700 tax cut under this Trump tax cut.
All right, pause it. Here is where I had one of my bigger failures. I didn't really pay attention to what he was saying there, but there is the average family. He uses that figure as opposed to the median family. So that's the old, if Sam Seder and Bill Gates are in a room, the average wealth between the two of us is somewhere around $1 billion or $2 billion or whatever. What does he have? Like 50 billion? I don't know, $25 billion. That's what the average is.
That's if we redistributed all the wealth.
That's what the average is. But the median is something very different because the median is where the family sitting in the middle. And for the median family, the tax cuts was actually closer to about $800. Now, $800 isn't nothing, but if, like I say, if I give Charlie a raise in his volume by 3 units on his microphone, but I give me 7, guess who you're going to hear more from, folks? It's going to be me. And that's the problem. Your purchasing power is, and your political power is diminished if I give that much more money to billionaires.
That's good for consumer spending power, that's good for savings, and it's good for, of course, what you would say is more demand-side economics, coupled with supply-side economics that created jobs and repatriated trillions of dollars of wealth back to America.
So everyone here has a phone, and they can Google the first 18 months of the Trump administration versus the last 18 months of the Obama administration. Wages have gone up 1.7% under the first 18 months of the Trump administration. Inflation is up 3.8%. That is simply a fact. Now, if you narrow the time horizon, you can come up with numbers that you're talking about. And this is why people have to be careful about statistics, because I can come up here and manipulate anything. Yes, Latino wages are up. In fact, the middle class is making more money today than in $61,000 than in the past. However, like I say, inflation is up. The cost of higher education has gone up 110% since 1994. So it doesn't matter if the middle class is making $61,000 if to lead the middle class life that you were talking about is that much more expensive. If the middle class liked the tax cuts, they wouldn't disfavor them far greater than they do even Obamacare at this point, right? I mean, so the bottom line is we can throw out statistics, but if they're not contextualized, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so
everyone knows the tax cuts went to the wealthy. Am I demonizing them? No. The point is that they have an inordinate amount of wealth and income in this country, and it turns into political power. And I know you have a problem with that. And the way to solve that is to flatten the tax, is to not give them tax cuts and more power, and give corporations more power and cash to pay off their shareholders, which tend to be the board of directors and the CEOs, but rather to spread the wealth.
So, okay. There are some things I agreed with. However, to contextualize it further, it doesn't make the economic growth, the economic success any less exceptional or any less historic because
it's following the same trajectory as the Obama administration. It goes like this.
Okay, so
he hasn't screwed it up.
Sam, I routinely restrain myself during your comments to allow you.
Thank you for that, Charlie.
And that's a big deal for me. If you watched yesterday,
feel free to interrupt me when you think I've said something wrong.
If that you heard it, everyone heard it.
Well, it's
okay,
can we do that one more time? That is such a smart move. It's so because
I had to because he just lies.
He just well, of course, but also practically. I mean, practically because he just lies. But I mean, there's no escape. What is he going to say? No, we should stick to format so I can lie. It's beautiful. Right. And then also, you look really accountable. Like, hey, man, let's both be honest.
Totally.
By all means, if I'm wrong or God forbid being dishonest, please correct me.
A couple points there. The first of all, the big misconception that I have with your original analysis is that just because someone gets rich, someone got poor. That is categorically false. If a wealthy person increases their net worth, they did not exploit someone to get wealthier. They had to take a risk, employ a bunch of people, buy a building, have a really good idea, and people had to continue to buy that.
Now, in a slightly different topic, I would have addressed the fact that, of course, yes, they're exploiting their labor. They're both doing it in terms of like a Marxist critique, but also many times in this country, particularly under Trump, when you have rolled back all sorts of protections for workers, they're doing it in a more explicit, almost illegal way.
Well, you're doing it in a liberal way, which is you're violating contract law.
Right, exactly.
That's pretty simple.
Exactly.
Those products over and over again. And you and I will have a philosophical and economic difference in this. I come from a perspective that does not believe in the zero-sum game and does not believe in the fixed pie fallacy. Instead, I believe that when someone gets richer, they must employ an extraordinary amount of people. They had to take a huge risk. They had a higher than likely chance not to.
Now, wait a second. Now, a lot of people thought he was like baiting me on that, but when we have talked about zero sum, it has not been in the context of economic growth. And that's what he's
but I
talking.
think they just pick. I mean, he mentioned
That's
it
close
enough that
enough.
it's hard to imagine that they didn't have some. And
I think it's
also,
just-
you think that I mean,
He hits it 4 times.
I would give him some credit. I'm sure he or somebody around him listened to the show once or
Yeah,
twice.
it's a total misunderstanding of the.
Oh, wait. Are you telling me?
Okay,
that they,
continue.
oh,
To succeed, they probably borrowed money, and then they had to create something that all of us had to buy over and over and over again. That inherently allows the standard of living to increase for all people, prices to usually go down, and then you enter competition. It's very, very difficult to do that time and time again. And you see in market-based economies, you have to have really, really good ideas for a long period of time to accumulate that kind of wealth. With that being said, those that get wealthy because of access to power, such as 8 out of the 10 wealthiest counties in America around Washington, D.C., they're not actually creating anything that I would consider to be of value to the middle class, because they're being rewarded to their geographic proximity to a $4.4 trillion federal budget that is extracting money away from middle class Americans. Those are the lobbyists, those are the trial lawyers, those are the people working for the corporations that are lobbying not on behalf of middle America, but on behalf of people around Washington, D.C. So in that, you and I will agree.
Well, okay. The people who live in the counties you're talking about are overwhelmingly arms sales and military-industrial complex people.
I'm not
the Trump
defending that,
administration raised the budget
That
of
I
the military
don't agree with.
by $700 billion over the next 10 years.
But Sam,
that money's flowing into those. Is that right or wrong?
I don't agree with that, though. So I will have a
Okay.
consensus
Well,
that
but my
we
point
should-
is Donald Trump is the one who is leading that
but
extraction
so
of wealth.
first of all,
but let me finish.
Didn't you say I can interrupt you if you said
If I said something wrong.
Yes. So it's only $700 billion of our budget every single year. What's the rest? It's to entitlements. It is to the
Social
bureaucracies.
Security
How about the government contracts for housing and urban development? The government contracts for health and human services.
you were talking
what about
about
the government
those
contracts?
counties.
Yeah. So
Those
those counties that get the government contracts outside of the defense contracts are also what I put my critique on.
Minuscule. The
$3.2 trillion is not minuscule.
It's a made-up number. Let's talk Kansas for a moment, shall we? Because
I wish you explained why it was a made-up number.
Well, all right. So the fact of the matter is that our budget, the biggest expenses we have are Medicare, Social Security, and the military. And then the entire rest of the government is like about a fifth of the remaining money that we spend. Maybe it's a little bit less than a fifth, but let's just call it a fifth. And so the HUD contracts that he's talking about are minuscule compared to the rest of the budget. And I got news for you. Here's what no one in those counties are making money off of: Social Security. They're not. There's no way for them. They're not selling Social Security.
I like how he agrees with you about the military-industrial contractors in Virginia, but the second thing he had to mention was, as opposed to that, the most famous thing in those suburbs, he mentioned trial lawyers.
There's no trial lawyers living in those areas either. I would say that that is probably one of the few jurisdictions where there's just not a lot of trial lawyers.
You don't know
living.
about all the trial lawyer think tanks in Arlington that are funded by Lockheed Martin and Raytheon?
Part of the problem is like with some of the times, and this is something that I got to work on in the context of the debate, is like I couldn't even understand what his point was. It was so sort of disparate. So I had to choose one. And that's basically the trick in these things, is that what is the overall notion is that you're getting ripped off by 5 different groups that are just maybe associated with what he's talking about, maybe not. And so you pick one. But then I wanted to basically take the offensive and talk about Kansas, because theoretically we were still talking about the tax cuts because it was the only question the moderator asked.
You can talk about what a small business does for employment. I'm a small businessman, and I understand what small business does. In Kansas, if I had been living in Kansas, I would have gotten a huge tax break because I'm an S corp. Huge. Under Sam Brown back in 2012. He brought in Arthur Laffer, who I'm sure you're familiar with, is the god for folks like you in many respects. The idea being, if we cut taxes on the wealthy, they will spread this wealth. It will trickle down on all of us. It will shower down on us, right? It will rain upon us. And we will all be sprinkled with this golden shower, if you will. And the economy will explode. And people will have jobs, and everything will work out. In fact, revenue will go up. That's what Mitch McConnell told us after this tax cut, too. And what happened in Kansas was a disaster. It was such an unmitigated disaster. Not only did it destroy Kansas's educational system, The Republican-controlled State House rose taxes 4 years later because their economic growth lagged, their employment lagged, and then Sam Brownback was literally made ambassador to like ether, right? He's like the ambassador to religion now. He's been jettisoned into the atmosphere in some way because that is the perfect example of the Republican conservative philosophy, and it failed. And we know that it's failing now on a national level
can I chip in here?
because Mitch McConnell made the same promise about the deficit. In fact, Larry Kudlow, the chief economic advisor of the president, made the same promise in July. And we now have a deficit that is twice the size it was when Obama left office. And now Mitch McConnell wants to cut Medicare and Social Security because of those taxes.
You're not going to hear me. You're not going to hear me defend federal
pause
deficits.
it for 1 second. Now, I will just say this. Some people had a complaint that I was using the deficits in this context because there really isn't a problem with these deficits. However, deficits are used exactly in the way that Mitch McConnell has used them, which is to justify, because most people in this country, and I am not one of those people, but I live in this country and I have to take the terms as they exist on some level. I could argue that deficits don't matter, but then I've taken myself out of this argument. And once I argue that deficits don't matter in this context, I don't have a response for why, the way that Mitch McConnell uses them. And so they are using these as a justification, these deficits as a justification for cutting Social Security and Medicare. And so I didn't want to have the argument about MMT in this context because it wasn't just a modern monetary theory. But so I just want to note that for people. I don't think deficits are that problematic, except to the extent that they are used as a justification to cut the most important programs for Americans. So really, in many respects, when you get a tax cut like this, it is zero sum, because if it wasn't zero sum, for them, they wouldn't pretend to care about the deficit.
Or our exploding national debt. Quick fact, Barack Obama added more debt than any other president in U.S. history.
Do you defend these tax cuts that have doubled the deficit?
So the tax cuts should have been coupled with spending cuts. However, we have explosive economic growth. We have more people in the labor force than ever
before. That's revenue coming in.
We have trillions of dollars repatriating back to America. Let me finish. I allowed you to have your Kansas example. Now that we're talking about states, let's talk about the juxtaposition of the failed state of California with the successful state of Texas. And I think I want a country that's going to look a lot more like Florida and Texas and a lot less like Illinois and California. Now, what have states like Illinois and California done? Well, they're losing citizens, number one. They're losing job creators. They're losing entrepreneurs because they have raised taxes. They have reckless politicians in both states like Illinois and California. What have Texas and Florida done? They've kept their taxes low. Both have no state income tax. They have deregulated their economies, and Sam would even agree with that. Texas, during the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, 2010, comprised 1 out of 3 of all jobs created across the country. And if you couple that with, if you juxtapose that, if you will,
all right,
with
pause
Illinois.
it now. All through this diatribe, we had basically the oil and gas and fracking. Like in North Dakota, there was also like huge job creation.
Pretty good job creation.
Because of fracking, which have large costs associated with them.
It's win-win.
Right, in terms of climate change and in terms of people's health. And I don't think Florida is the place you want to go to talk about enormous economic growth. And Illinois has a Republican governor. But the point is, like, all of this stuff is pretty narrow. But this is where he wanted to go. So I continue.
That in the Midwest is booming except Illinois. Every state in the Midwest has a 3% GDP growth. Illinois has a 1.8% GDP growth, despite Chicago being an exceptional city that's being screwed up by corrupt politicians in one political party. And you look at California, that should be the most prosperous, that should be the richest state in the country. And yes, you'll say it is the richest country. It also is the most populous country, with the most amount of homeless people, with the most amount of people living in poverty, with crumbling schools.
Pause it. Yes, one would expect the most populous country to have the most amount of people associated with societal ills. So if you have the most amount of people in the country living in a state, the most populous state will more than likely have the most populous homeless population.
Yeah, I mean, and also, I mean, even more. But there's. I was actually just talking with Waz about this the other day. Like, there's more of some certain aspects of homelessness around LA, as an example, because the weather's nice. And
well,
it's
yes,
an easier place to do that. So people come from other places so they don't freeze to death in the winter. Sort of makes sense. But also, I would even say, like, just slightly more substantively, like, and you don't have time to get into this, but like, this also is a difference inside the broad center-left to left coalition, because certainly, like, the more liberal California legislature has proposed doing a bit more for this stuff, and Jerry Brown's a tightwad. He doesn't want to spend money, and they don't want to tax the Silicon Valley people. So to the extent it even is true because of policy, it's true from a left, even just a Keynesian critique.
Democrats aren't as socialist as Kirk thinks.
Right. The Democrats are basically keeping tax rates
this is
lower.
an argument why they should be doing more.
Right.
But in the conservative mind, homelessness is not something that is a situation that has happened to people. Being on food stamps is not a providing a baseline so that people can eat. It is a virus that is distinct from people and that you can catch, as opposed to a condition that people find themselves in for a myriad of reasons that we could impact the condition. But there is a certain, morality that is associated with this. So they think it's like something like that is a virus that spreads to people if you have Democrats around them.
Let me finish, Sam. I know you got plenty of differences, but as long as if you want to talk about states, allow me to address the Kansas example. Kansas, if you look at Kansas versus a state like Connecticut, Kansas had higher economic growth and was creating more jobs versus similar size, similar population blue states during the Brownback tax cuts. There are a lot of other contributing factors to why Kansas was not exactly a pristine example of how to run a state, such as government corruption, such as misallocation of resources, and other diminishing businesses that went to states like Texas that had a zero state income tax. And so if you want to talk about the contrast of states, it's the red states that are rated 9 out of 10 of the most pro-business states in America have Republican governors and Republican legislatures. The most pro-growth states in America are run by Republicans. I'm glad you mentioned it, though.
The reason why I bring up Kansas is because the dynamic is identical to the one that Donald Trump, this is what we're talking about, that Donald Trump and the Republicans did on a national level. Now, here's how the game works, and this is why it is zero-sum. Because you give these massive tax cuts to the wealthy, and you repatriate money from overseas that ends up going into shareholder buybacks, to stock buybacks. We know that 84% of stocks in this country are owned by the top 10%.
This is a great point.
Great. And 60% of those tax dollars that were repatriated went into the hands of those people. We saw no job growth as a function of that repatriation. We saw none of the trickle down that we're supposed to see. We see these tax cuts, and then Mitch McConnell brings down the hammer. We're going to cut Social Security. We're going to cut Medicare. These are the most popular, the most successful programs in the country, and the only way the Republicans can cut them is to create an economic crisis, and that is by giving money to wealthy people.
Okay, so let's talk about the stock buyback. So let's talk about the stock buyback. So you say 84%. What that doesn't contextualize, to use your word, is money managers that are controlling money for pension funds. So
that does include pension funds,
Sam, it does
401k.
Not. Sam, it does not. Goldman Sachs controls money for the California State Pension Fund. It's categorized as Goldman Sachs controlling that money, not as the pension fund. So when the stock market goes up, the teachers, the firefighters, the police officers, their 401ks go up, their pensions go up, and their net worth goes up. So when the stock market explodes, Sam, I allowed you to finish.
You're lying.
Okay, so So when a money manager, for example, when GCTR partners from Chicago, Sam, answer the question. When Goldman Sachs controls the California State Pension Fund, is it classified as the California State Pension Fund buying the securities or Goldman Sachs buying the securities? Goldman Sachs. So when you use, you know that's true.
84%. I will tell you what the number is.
Okay.
Google it.
Again, so
84%
your number
of
is
stocks
correct. However, to add context to it, Sam, is that the money manager is in the 1%, but the money they're managing is pension fund money that are people in the middle class. So what you're saying is not incorrect, but it's only half true because it is the middle class people's money that they're managing. With that being said, let's use an example. Zero evidence that repatriation created any jobs. I'll use a microcosm example. How about Foxconn that created 4,000 jobs in Wisconsin because they repatriated the money away from Chinese manufacturing jobs to American manufacturing jobs?
All right, pause it for 1 second. All right, first off, I have tried to track down this concept that he's suggesting, that the manager of... Where is that coming from? Oh, I don't know. Maybe that's coming out of my thing. All right, that the manager of a fund is listed as the owner of the fund. Now, I don't know how to disprove that. I'm looking at the Edward Wolf NIBAR paper 24085, issued in November of 2017, that talked about the asset plunges, prices plunging between 2007 and 2010, and who owned the stocks. And it includes 401ks and pensions and whatnot. I don't know if pensions would be classified by who manages them. That does not make sense to me because it's called the California pension. And we have some awareness of that. Yes, that is a huge several $billion pension. It's a lot of people. Nevertheless, there are trillions of dollars invested in all sorts of in our markets.
And by the way, that's another maneuver there too, right? Not that you had time or it would have been useful necessarily, but like, yeah, maybe we should have a debate about Goldman Sachs and other Wall Street banks wiping out public pension funds with reckless bets on policies you supported being deregulated.
We do actually later in the thing. But and then he goes on to talk about Foxconn. Now, he talks about Foxconn repatriating funds to Wisconsin from China. And I should have addressed this because I was aware that Wisconsin is paying out $4 billion plus to Foxconn in incentives to get them to function in their country. I had not heard that. First of all, I had presumed that it was more jobs than 4,000. Plus, his use of repatriated does not make sense. The repatriation is about American companies who had overseas profits, and we're bringing that money back in as part of the tax deal at lower tax rates than they otherwise would have paid. And that's what repatriation referred to. And so when he brought up the Foxconn thing, I should have pushed back on this. And I think at the time I was thinking, like, I don't know what he's talking about. Like, he's talking about something that I think is different from what I know about because he's using the wrong words. You know, Foxconn is not repatriating anything because they didn't start here.
They're getting a sweetheart deal to open a factory.
Yeah, yes. They're repatriating all of these Chinese villages that they stole from America because of globalist trade deals.
Well, but that was part of the problem there, and so I got sort of thrown off, and I should have pushed back on that because, first off, this is the guy who doesn't want government intervention in the free market, and this is not terribly free markety from my perspective. But all right, continue.
Yeah, subsidy and Fox.
4,000 new jobs were created in Wisconsin because of the Trump tax cut that they directly attributed to a pro-business, pro-American mindset. That's 4,000 jobs in Wisconsin that otherwise did not exist under a Republican governor, Republican state legislature, and a president. Now, that's a microcosm example. You said there's zero evidence. That's a piece of evidence.
Well, look. People can look at the last time a Republican president repatriated that money. It was the American Jobs Creation Act, 2005. George Bush promoted this. He has come out and subsequently said that he got rolled, because all those companies that wanted that to supposedly add jobs, cut jobs. We know these money went to buybacks. We know why buybacks are legal now because of the Republican Party changed that regulation in the 80s when it used to be called stock manipulation. And we know that it benefits the CEOs and the shareholders, and that 84%. And it does not, it includes the California pensions, it includes every municipal and state pension and 401k in the country. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So, but here's another thing I do want to talk about, because you talk about, can you explain to me when someone gets richer, who exactly gets poorer? Can you explain how that process works? Like for example, when
I'll explain to you.
So who gets?
Folks, you understand the idea of buying power, right? If I give you, ma'am, $10 and school costs $10, you buy a school. But if school goes up to $20, then you don't have the same buying power. What drives the price of, let's say, housing, for instance? It is wealth inequality. And you see this in 10 cities across the country, the biggest metropolitan areas in the country. The middle class cannot afford to live there anymore because we have real estate going through the roof.
You're right. And so you have in states such as Illinois and Connecticut and California, because of excessive property taxes, people don't want to purchase some of those houses. So you have one of two problems that happen. Is that the middle class gets priced out. So the wealthy, if you will, the people that you are demonizing, will go up a bracket, and they'll say, well, if I'm going to pay $35,000 a year in property taxes, I might as well buy this XYZ house. Therefore, the middle class person who's trying to sell their house with an excessive property tax burden property taxes are one of the main reasons.
I'm a homeowner. I know what taxes are, and they're not nearly as much as if the price goes up.
Again, so in states like Illinois, property taxes can be anywhere between 6.5% to 9% for a state that doesn't work, for schools are completely and totally broken. So, but like, the foreign investment thing. So I'm still trying to get back.
Pause it. I didn't know how to address what he's saying there, because he's just the words don't connect. He's mentioning the state taxes. If state taxes were so high, it would have an adverse impact on prices. It would drop the price of the house. I mean, overall, you could say it's too expensive, but it doesn't even track with what he's saying. But he does just keep going.
He's got a deep well of talking points, and it doesn't really matter how relevant they are.
It's pretty impressive in that respect, but go ahead.
Some game. When an entrepreneur renders a service and employs a bunch of people, and you buy that service, who is getting poorer in that transaction? Because you said zero-sum game. I'm trying to understand.
I'm
in
talking
a market
about
economy,
tax cuts.
No, you're right. So tax cut, where an average middle-class family had a $2,700 tax cut, where you have the corporate rate that went from 35% effective. I understand a lot of corporations did not pay that. They used loopholes, of which I disagree with completely. Went down to 20% effective in January, and they used that money to invest in capital infrastructure, or they repatriated
stock buybacks.
So
they're using the money to buy.
Not exclusively. So stock buybacks. How about companies where the actual employees own the stock, and their own net worth goes up? Aren't they part of the middle class?
I am sure there are some members of the middle class who benefited from the tax cut.
That's what I'm saying, Sam.
The overwhelming thrust. Who's keeping someone from competing with Amazon?
What was that?
It looks like the TYT cut that out. I don't know. That's this stream here.
That's strange. Wow, did we lose? That couldn't have been much. That could have been just a blip.
Who's keeping someone from competing with Google?
Oh, okay, so I'm glad you asked.
Who's keeping someone?
Nobody. But you know who's keeping them from? You know who's trying to compete? Who's preventing them from to prevent against Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan? The Dodd-Frank bill, because it has so much regulation and such cumbersome rules. It disallows the local community bank from ever competing against them.
The local community bank is going to compete against Goldman Sachs.
Oh wait, hold on. I'm so glad
They've all been bought.
That's a great question. Where did these banks
start
from?
Hold on for one
Sam?
second. All right, so I just got an IM going back to the pension funds, and I'm glad some of it. Hi, Sam. Kirk is wrong about pension funds classified by the money manager. I do securities litigation, and these kind of statistics are formulated by the 13F reports. Pension funds report these 13F separately, and they are specific to the fund. I have no idea what he's talking about here. Now, honestly, like in that situation, you need to have a securities attorney.
Yeah, maybe debate isn't the best place to hash some of these things out, right?
Yeah, I mean, some in those areas, I think you just got to. I mean, the idea that I was like, I don't know how to disprove this.
It's
like
a perfect argument in that case.
Yes, exactly. But continue.
Where did Wells Fargo start? It started as a local community bank that eventually did a very good job of running their balance sheets, and then they became one of the Wall Street banks. It's not unheard of that
when there was no Dodd-Frank.
Exactly right. It was before Dodd-Frank, Sam.
Right. And they were not allowed to merge until that 96.
No, again, I think there is some merit to your Glass-Steagall argument. I do not think that is the primary factor why 2008 happened, nor would I say that reinstating Glass-Steagall will have competition back on.
Did we miss that? All that Glass-Steagall stuff?
What happened?
There's a big gap in that. That's strange. There was a big gap when we were talking about the Glass-Steagall because we're returning to it. All right, well, let's continue here. We'll try and find that segment that's missing. It's weird.
Wall Street. We will get competition back on Wall Street when we decentralize the SEC, when we decentralize the FDIC. We make it easier for people to give out loans and have FDIC deposit.
Like, I don't know what the words decentralize the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation means. Like, I don't. Like, that's the thing, is that there were times where he would say stuff like, I don't even understand what like, I know what the FDIC is, and I know what a decentralized means, but how would you decentralize this? This is an insurance fund, so that when you put in money into a bank, up to $250,000, I believe it is, for each individual depositor, at each bank. In the event that the bank goes under, because they have made a series of bad loans, let's say, and the loans go south, and certainly in the run-up to 2008, we started to see this quite a bit. They make too many loans, the businesses go out of business, and because they loan not only out, what's in the bank, what's in the deposits, but a certain percentage more than that, people could stand to lose all their money. And so the only way these banks can function in a way that is confident for people and you don't get bank runs is if the federal government says, like, look, we get you covered for the first 250 grand you got in that bank. And I don't know what it even means to decentralize it. Like, I don't know.
Bitcoin.
Honestly, like, it doesn't.
It's taking a weird, like, there was a line of people, I think, who some were sort of associated with like critiques of bureaucracy in the 70s that has almost nothing to do with what they're talking about today. And then maybe I don't know.
He doesn't know.
No.
There's no explanation.
My point is the real explanation is that you could connect those words with a tradition that he is not a part of in terms of policy. But what that is that's a nicer way of
FDIC, though.
Not at all.
I understand what
not
you're
at
saying.
all, and that's a nicer way of just saying he wants to get rid of insuring people's deposits, right? I mean, that's the only abolish the Treasury Department.
No,
or your check should come from several different agencies instead of one.
No, it means that he doesn't know what the FDIC does.
Or he doesn't know what the FDIC does. Yeah.
All right, here, continue.
Insurance backing. That is so hard to do right now because Goldman Sachs doesn't want that competition. It's very simple. When you have someone from Goldman Sachs running the Treasury Department that will probably work for Goldman Sachs after, and they worked for them before, they're going to try to protect Goldman Sachs' interests. What does that look like? Create rules and regulation that make it very hard for other banks to compete with Goldman Sachs. You and I agree with that.
We agree that the middle class is suffering for Trump's continuing to allow Goldman Sachs in there. Maybe we should both vote for Bernie Sanders.
Well, so
Elizabeth Warren.
And again, it's important to remember it's not just a Republican or Democrat thing. Both parties allow Goldman Sachs to run the Treasury Department. But let me say this:
Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders definitively would.
Well, she might 1,024th allow it to be run, but
there you go.
1,024th the Treasury Department might be run by someone.
Go for it twice.
Go for it twice. He actually tried to make that joke twice.
I know why. Like, I honestly did not hear that.
So when I saw you, I thought Sam is so done right now that he's not even gonna be like, yeah, dude.
Oh my God,
right?
I didn't know.
You didn't even acknowledge
because that dude was talking. The moderator here. Scroll back. I missed that completely.
Important to remember, it's not just a Republican or Democrat thing. Both parties allow Goldman Sachs to run the Treasury Department. But let me say this:
Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders definitively would.
Well, she might 1,024th allow it to be run, but 1,024th the Treasury Department might be run by someone from Goldman Sachs.
So, while we still have a little bit of
again.
time, I want to make sure we talk about trade and tariffs. I suspect there might be some agreement, some disagreement here. I'll start with Charlie. Give us your take on Trump's trade policy, his tariffs.
Yeah, pause it. We missed the whole thing where I said we should
do
together
you agree with it?
support a 21st century.
Yeah, they cut out the best
Glass-Steagall.
part. Shit.
And all right, well, let's continue. That's very weird. We'll have to track that down.
What's your take? I have a more nuanced opinion on it. I think what he's doing with China is terrific. I think China.
Well, pause it. They also missed the part where he was talking about the banking. I
feel like they missed the part where you challenged him to list the three.
No, that regulations comes up later, doesn't it? Or no?
Regulations is later,
I think. I hope.
Yeah, partial.
Okay.
Debate.
Has been an unfair actor on the world stage for far too long. They still are categorized as a developing nation in the World Trade Organization, which allows them access to subsidies. They build a coal-fired power plant every single month, which as soon as they exit as a developing nation, under that certification, it would be much more difficult to do that. Sam and I might actually agree on that.
Pause it.
And
what was also sort of amazing is like you just justified the huge subsidy for Foxconn 20 minutes earlier, and you're crying subsidies to help China now on some type of principled level. Like it's just, okay.
look, China steals our IP. So the way it works in China is if you want to trade with them, you have to essentially form a partnership with the government. They'll copy your good or service, and then they'll sell it back into the market that you're competing in, probably quicker than it will take for you to manufacture back in that country. Generally, I'm a free trade guy, and if the goal is to get to low tariffs with some of these countries, I'm all for it. But with China, I consider them to be the great existential threat of the West and of America, and I totally, completely support what Trump is doing with China.
IP is not pro-free trade. Just technically speaking, right?
Well, technically speaking, but I mean, in terms, the United States has written every single trade agreement with loads of IP regulations that are bad for public health. So, like,
you know what country built its publishing industry off of no copyright and IP laws in the 19th century? United States.
The United States, they sure did, but not when it came to South Africa delivering generic AIDS drugs to their people. Then you needed to tighten up on that.
Yeah.
The Trump tariffs on China, and there are issues to some extent with China. The Trump tariffs on China are a tax on the U.S. Middle class. Ford is going to be laying off close to 12% of their workforce as a function of these steel tariffs. You have a lot of smaller companies that are looking for exclusions to these steel tariffs that make pipe fittings or whatnot. The Trump administration, because they have big donors who are major U.S. steel manufacturers, have denied every single one of those waivers. You see it with Iowa farmers who are paying stand up to about $620 million worth of cost to Iowa farmers. So from a middle class perspective, I think the tariffs are damaging them. There's some benefit in the new NAFTA to some auto workers, but it codifies the monopolies by Big Pharma by forcing these monopolies on Canada as well. And really, look, the number one issue that the middle class is facing is healthcare. And that's why we see every election across the country, we see Democrats running on healthcare and Republicans pretending that they're not signed on to the lawsuit that will destroy some of the most popular elements of the Affordable Care Act / patient protection bill. So maybe we could turn to that where it'll be a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the trade, I think we can agree on part of it and disagree. Let's talk about healthcare. First of all, the Trump tax cut also included a repeal of the individual mandate, which was the largest tax on our generation. And if you don't believe it's a tax, just read John Roberts' opinion that upheld Obamacare. It is a tax on people that do not need to necessarily buy health insurance by force, and were being forced to buy something that was completely out of their income bracket. But in healthcare in particular, there have been bill after bill that would have lowered premiums, that would have allowed health insurance to be bought across state lines, that have been opposed bitterly by Democrats and some Republicans because they're bought by the health insurance companies. And I would be much more on the side of that we need to actually have a market in healthcare. And we have anything but a market. We have an oligopoly controlled by a consortium of health insurance companies that are in bed with the pharmaceutical companies. I agree with Sam, that are also in bed with the regulators from the FDA. And so you can kind of see a constant theme. In healthcare and higher education in particular, which are two things I talk about a lot, the reason why prices continue to skyrocket, in my opinion, which Sam will totally disagree, is an inside-out relationship between the entities that are raising the prices and the entities that are controlling those markets, and the government regulators and government institutions and government politicians, where you actually allow a market to happen and you deregulate and you allow competition and entrepreneurs to cut prices. That will change quite quickly.
There have been probably a dozen waivers for in various states across where insurance companies can sell across states. They don't do it because their risk pools, they're much more comfortable in dealing with markets they know. When they go into other states, they lose money. And that's why they don't do it. The idea that there's any inhibition for insurance companies to sell across states, there is no federal law that says that they can't do it. Each state has their own insurance regulators. That is not a federal law whatsoever. They have tried it time and time again. The risk pools are different. They cannot make money. That's why insurance companies don't do it. What is going on now is 20 Republican states are suing the federal government because of that small tax that was the individual mandate, which incidentally has risen the cost of premiums by almost 15% since Donald Trump has taken
So it
office.
proves that young people were subsidizing this backwards healthcare system. It proves that our generation was being taxed.
That's
to pay.
right.
Oh, okay, so that's right. So our generation has to pay more for something we're not going to get.
Well, you don't know that you won't get it, right? Now, if the Republicans have their way, you will lose your pre-existing conditions. If you have
That is not correct, Sam.
That is 100% correct.
The bill that was voted down.
I'm talking the lawsuit by 20 Republican states that is not being defended by the Trump administration DOJ. If that lawsuit, which is not being defended by the federal government that has the law, is successful at the Republican-controlled Supreme Court, if you have pre-existing conditions, you can be denied your health insurance or you can be charged through the roof. If you're 26 or younger, you cannot be on your parents' thing. You will have lifetime caps. You will have yearly caps. You will not get essential benefits. You will not get your free colonoscopy. You will not get your free mammogram.
Nothing is free, Sam. Stop saying that. Nothing's free. I mean, some taxpayer, someone is paying for it.
Tax-supported mammograms or your colonoscopies. And we will end up paying even more because nothing is free. We pay as a nation.
Just said free colonoscopy.
Well, yeah, Charlie.
So taxpayer-funded colonoscopy would be a better way to put it.
Are you paying for the microphone? No.
No, they're paying me to be here, so
Okay. Look, the bottom line is yes. When government provides you services, it collects tax, and that's the way it way it's paid for. It is far more efficient to have a single payer for health insurance than the private insurance industry, in part for the reasons you mentioned, in part because there's no profit off the top. But for those reasons, we should probably have a single-payer health insurance program in this country.
So, but I hear this argument a lot, and I'm hearing you imply it, that somehow a market stops working as soon as it goes into healthcare. Is that something that, I mean, it works in food, it works in housing, it works in technology.
Well, it doesn't work in housing.
Quality goes up.
It doesn't work in housing.
It doesn't work in housing?
No, we have, you said yourself, we have how many homeless do we have in this country?
Because California has excessive environmental regulation.
Well, are there is there in Texas or no homeless?
Yes, in Texas they're far more deregulated than in California.
Do they have homeless people?
Of course, but far less than in the state of California.
And do they have Section 8 housing in Texas?
I'm sorry?
Do they have Section 8 housing in Texas?
Yes, but again, far less than in the state of California.
Would they have more homeless? Of course. So in housing, we see the failure of the private market. We see it certainly.
Okay, so homelessness is not a failure of the private market. Here's the thing. So the idea is that somehow, if you eliminate profit from health, that profit should not be involved in healthcare. That's
right. All right, pause it for 1 second. I just want to give you some more specifics. As of 2017, there were 6 states that enacted laws to allow cross-state sales: Georgia, Kentucky, Maine, Rhode Island, Washington, and Wyoming. None of those states, as of in 2017, had a single new insurer enter its market because of its law. When asked about their law, state officials and insurance experts in those states agreed that establishing a competitive provider network is the primary barrier to new market entrants. Not law. It's just simply, it's too hard to go into a state across state lines because you actually need to know the people and the risk pool that's involved, and it's too risky. Insurance companies are basically gamblers. And under the ACA, there was what were derided by conservatives. And again, I would prefer scrap the entire private industry because this is just more proof that it is not capable of delivering this product. But you'll recall, there were slush funds for insurance companies. And that is because whenever they move into a new market, in this instance, it was providing individual health care to people not associated with their jobs. Remember, the only people who bought new insurance via the ACA were about 10 million Americans who were buying through the exchanges. 4 to 5% of Americans, tops. There was another 4 or 5% got it from Medicaid. The only implications for the rest of us was that the amount of profit you could get on insurance was capped at 20%. And what insurance had to provide was also mandated. So these slush funds would essentially inoculate insurance companies from having to service a new clientele because they couldn't predict how sick these people would be and how much it would cost them to provide services versus how much they would take in premiums. And so these so-called slush funds were set up essentially to smooth that out. We're going to backstop how much you can lose in this situation.
So you blame the market for that?
Right. The market, actually, this is it's a horrible...
Sam, have you been to Texas?
But continue here.
Not only is that, so you would say food is essential to health to living. Why not have government subsidized grocery stores?
We do.
Oh, how?
Sugar, corn, wheat.
We pay farmers not to grow. It's the opposite of we literally subsidize inactivity. We subsidize not producing.
all of these products.
To tell that we subsidize farmers not to produce.
In 1972,
of which, and by the way, I literally oppose subsidies. Here's the point: is a market, no matter where a market is allowed to be enacted, whether it be in healthcare, any sort of sector.
So how we subsidize these are, I mean, in some instances we tell them not to grow it. That raises the price. That is a subsidy. Like we literally hand them money. That is a subsidy. I don't know. You know, like you get stuck. They're like, wait, you're describing a subsidy, and you're saying you're trying to prove the fact that it's not a subsidy. And I don't know beyond like, you know, flashing a dictionary up. It's a subsidy. We subsidize food, of course.
You do know that corn doesn't come from magic seeds, Sam.
You will always see prices go down, quality go up, and more people have access to it.
I know you're
Those are the principles of a market.
But
they don't stop working because you implement
them. We
in
don't have a
healthcare.
choice if you need health care. LASIK eye surgery is elective.
Wait, so someone who can't see and might be blind that gets LASIK, that's somehow elective? Because LASIK eye surgery is dealing with one of your vital organs. It takes someone with a high specialization degree.
Pause it. Now, I had seen a debate that he had done a year ago where he brought up LASIK eye, or maybe it was, and so I knew he was going there, so I just jumped on it before he got there, because that's his big example of a surgery that cost a lot of money when it was first done, and then when it was widely adopted, the price of it went down. Now, incidentally, it's the opposite with Invisalign braces, I've noticed. And I imagine that in the context of LASIK surgery, because it's not one specific product, that they don't have the same ability to gouge people. But again, LASIK eye surgery is elective. That's why I kept pointing to my glasses. I have not elected to get LASIK eye surgery. I don't have a choice if you find a tumor in my colon. I'm not going to be like, I'll live with it, because maybe I won't. But continue.
And well, sight might be elective to you. You're wearing glasses, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily elective. But it requires a specialized technician, surgeon, doctor. And so it's not any less important. Here's the thing. There's two different things. There's healthcare and there's health insurance. Two totally different things. We have the best healthcare for those who can afford it, correct? How do you expand access to something and get the price down? A market. It works in everything, Sam.
There's a lot of medical error in America. I don't know.
That's one of the leading causes of death in the United States is medical error. Yeah.
Yeah. It has failed.
We don't have a market in healthcare. We do not. We limit the amount of doctors that go into healthcare every single year. We have a national doctor quota that the American Medical Association lobbies for. I know you never heard of it. You should Google it, because it's
we have in this country.
We have a national quota of doctors that the American Medical Association. The American Medical Association will allow a certain amount of doctors.
Now hold on for a second. Apparently, we have a. I have never heard of this quota, frankly. And I didn't know anything about it. Now, there is I'm looking at a page here, the JOC.com. I don't know what the JOC is. The doctor quota. This is from 1997. And it is possible that the AMA won't accredit enough schools, I guess. I'm not sure what's involved with that. But I certainly am in favor of driving down the price of doctors. I mean, the pay of doctors. But I don't, let's see, I guess there's some type of rationing of medical degrees in the United States in terms of the number of medical schools. Now, maybe that's conceivably possible. But I also saw an earlier debate of his where he talked about the ratio of doctors to patients, and he said it was 1 to 1,000. And so I brought that up, but it turns out that the ratio of doctors to patients in other places is actually like higher. So, I mean, lower, I should say. But here, that explains where I'm going with this.
Doctors, and how many doctors per patient do we have in this country?
Enlighten me.
We have what, 1 to 1,000, is it?
No, I'm asking you, enlighten me.
I think it's close to 1 to 1.
So when you have more doctors doing something, therefore you're going to have more competition in that pool, which would bring down prices. And by the way, speaking of pricing,
smaller ratio, far larger ratio in the other Western industrialized nations. And in fact, they spend far less on healthcare and have
they
better
pay it in taxes, though. Sam, here's the thing. So you
the Mercatus study. You're familiar with the Mercatus study, yes?
No, tell me what it is.
Mercatus is...
Mercatus. I'm sorry, the Mercatus study.
Correct, the Mercatus study.
Which scored Bernie Sanders $25 trillion.
32 trillion.
32 trillion, right.
It scored Bernie Sanders' single-payer health care program at $32 trillion over the course of 10 years. It scored what we would pay as a nation for health care if we didn't do single-payer as being $35 trillion.
Right, so your solution would then be to take that in taxes and to appropriate it for a single payer.
That's correct.
So I don't want to live in a country that has a 55 to 60% tax rate to pay for something that I'm never going to benefit
Here's
from.
the problem you have. Here's the problem Charlie has.
So don't tell me what to do with my money and take away 60% of my earnings to pay for something that I'm not going to benefit from.
If Charlie doesn't want to live in a country that appropriates his money to pay for health care for other people, he's got nowhere else to go except for maybe a third world country, because every single other Western industrialized country
I'm going to give you the last word
doing
here.
that for their citizens, and they are saving money and providing better health care outcomes.
With 50 to 60, the highest tax rate, highest tax rate in a country that Sam likes to talk about a lot, Norway, is 78%. That's not a country that I want to live in. And maybe it is. Maybe
this country had 90% highest tax rate for 30 years during the...
That's marginal versus effective, Sam. You know there's a difference. Do not demagogue it.
Marginal.
Explain to the audience marginal versus effective. You just demagogue something.
Why do you like the word demagogue so much?
Well,
He's
first
really
of all,
into that.
Marginal versus effective. Like, I don't...
Why does he think that's such a slam dunk?
Opposing.
I don't...
Yeah.
They're not... I don't think he understands fully what that difference is. Like, the marginal rate is like it runs contrary to the point he's trying to make, I think. Like, the effective tax rate of people at that time, back when the marginal tax rate was 90% for every dollar made after, I think it was $470,000, what would be equivalent to somewhere to $2 to $3 million today. The effective tax rate would be like after you do all your tax loopholes, how much are you really paying? So it would be less. But I'm making the argument in this country that we've paid more taxes. And those tax loopholes haven't gone away. So I don't know.
The only way I can interpret it is if he's saying, like, yeah, it was 90%, but they weren't actually paying that because they were writing off it till down to like 40. But I don't think that is.
But 40 would still be higher than it would be today.
Even if you said that, what that would be, I mean, if you were saying people didn't pay 60% of their taxes, which I don't know, like, there's a lot of loopholes out there. But
accountants 50 years ago were nuts.
Yeah, accountants 50 years ago were very creative.
And the thing is that the taxation in Norway is also is marginal as well. I couldn't figure out if he was saying.
And they also get the thing rebated to them, which is their collective share of a nationalized oil industry, which they get a direct deposit back from the government from.
All right, well, let's listen to where he's trying to go with this.
Marginal tax rate means that for every dollar.
Okay, so it wasn't the effective. That's the difference. It's effective tax rate in Norway is a difference.
Well, the effective tax rate was probably about 80%.
It was 38%. Then it went up to 44%. You just said go. Guys.
The tax rate.
Oh, that was that moment. I should tell you. We go back here a little bit. You can hear somebody yell at me, "Shut the fuck up." Some dude did, and now it turns out that he was that Charlie was wrong. It's not an effective tax rate. It's the marginal tax rate in Norway. I don't know what the effective tax rate would have to be to get 78%, maybe 90, but it's 78%. And for some reason, some guy over in the corner, so was he a sovereign citizen? He could have been.
The guy was passionate about the Norwegian tax system. He says, "Shut
the fuck up." And you'll notice I put my microphone down and I tell him to go F himself. So he wants
Sam Seder, alpha cuck.
Well, I was I was ready. Like,
you don't ever interrupt me when I'm talking about taxes.
Exactly, you son of a bitch. Here we go.
50 to 60. The highest tax rate in a country that Sam likes to talk about a lot, Norway, is 78%. That's not a country that I want to live in. And maybe it is. Maybe
this country had
conversation.
90% highest tax rate for 30 years during the.
That's marginal versus effective, Sam. You know there's a difference. Do not demagogue it.
Marginal.
Explain to the audience marginal versus effective. You just demagogue something. What's marginal versus effective?
Does he think he's
marginal tax rate
here?
means that for every dollar.
Okay, so it wasn't the effective. That's the difference. It's effective tax rate in Norway. It's a difference.
Well, the effective tax rate was probably about 80%.
It was 38%. Then it went up to 44%. You just say go.
The tax rate.
Nice.
The tax rate.
This
under
the final point.
the tax rate.
Under Dwight D. Eisenhower went all the way up to 90% on the effective. Not
Every
the
dollar after $400,000 was taxed at a 90% rate. That would be at about $2 million a year now. And so the marginal tax rate, you can work it out. We have such incredible wealth inequality that when you're talking about some of the billionaire funders that we might know,
or the
effective tax rate,
we're not getting into
the effective tax rate is going to be quite high, maybe 85%.
Okay. Yes, I love billionaires that created millions of jobs and wealth for all Americans. I think we should applaud those.
Okay. All right.
He
so
personally
we're
should.
Out of time.
Yes.
He personally should absolutely appreciate.
We're out of time here, but I actually thought that was a very constructive
All right,
debate.
pause it now for 1 second. Now, we should tell you, for whatever reason,
Let's respond to Jank's breakdown now.
We have the time code on the other one? All right, can we play that other one? Because it was 19 minutes long that we lost.
Missed 19 minutes. Yeah, it was that whole section where you had him name three things that helped the middle class.
All right, we'll do that tomorrow because I think the best section of the debate.
Yeah, they clipped out the juicy stuff.
Why did they do that?
It's weird.
Yeah, you gotta talk to Jenks.
The best section of the debate, where I think I got him to do the worst, was on when I asked him to name 3 regulations that Donald Trump has cut and how they've helped the middle class. And the first one he mentioned was the coal, basically rolling back the restrictions on coal, which have led to, which create a tremendous amount of obviously it's a problem from standpoint of global warming, but also from health problems. But he claimed that it created 200,000 to 300,000 new jobs in West Virginia, which would mean that something like 1/6 of the total population of West Virginia got new jobs in the past 2 years.
Was the other one about this? Was it Superfund sites where it's like farmers?
Then he
with
said the
oil?
Consumer Protection Finance,
right.
the CFP. We're gonna go back and find that. That's very strange.
We'll take that whole section.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've got to get in touch with TYT and ask them why they have that.
Stepping on your shine.
Who are they protecting?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's take a couple of phone calls. Some people have been hanging on for a long time, and some IMs, and then we'll get out of here. But we will link, if you're watching on YouTube, to that the debate. We will link to that update. Calling from a 916 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? (916) 916. All right, not there. All right, we have time for one more call. Folks, I'm sorry. Calling from a 206 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This would be Mike.
Mike, what's on your mind?
The migrant caravan. I've been hearing conservatives bring up this point a lot about who's paying for it, who organized it. Accusing George Soros and, just liberals in general of encouraging these people to come up here so that they could all jump over the border and immediately vote. And I can't help but wonder because conservatives project everything. And it makes me wonder, who is paying for this? Who organized this? Who benefits from this? The timing is just peculiar. I don't see anyone asking the question. They've got, media.
Well, I'm not sure. You ask the question because I'm not exactly sure what you're getting at.
Well, I'm getting at that. I'm kind of wondering if it's so convenient that this happens just in time for the midterms, just in time to drive the base.
That Republicans would be behind.
Oh, I see. I mean,
well, yeah, I don't really think of them as Republicans. I think of them as conservatives.
I see what you're saying. I just, based upon the reporting I've seen, some of it happened as a fluke. There was a television station that reported that people were gathering together for this caravan, and that somebody had reported that another guy was funding it. This guy, I'm not exactly sure who it was. And I don't know. I mean, I guess that's possible, but to a certain extent, I think what you're seeing is this is the best time to travel from those countries because it's not so hot because it's summer, but it's not other seasons where I think the weather maybe make things more treacherous. And there's been caravans in the past too because there's safety in numbers. But what's the point? What are you going to do about that? I mean, I think you got to argue on its merits that it's not as people shouldn't be as fearful. And what if we found out that some Republican operative planted this story and it snowballed and it worked out successfully? What are you going to do about it? I mean, the bottom line is people have to go out and vote against Republican candidates, period.
What bothers me about it is that Republicans make this accusation and then that everyone else has to go like, no, it's not us. We didn't do it. We're not doing this on purpose. We're always on the defensive. Why can't we turn around and say like, yeah, it is awful.
But dude, what is the value of that? There's a lot more value in saying, what are people afraid of? What are these families who are desperate, who are escaping their homes? What risk do they present to us? They're running from violent people. That's why they're coming.
I'm well aware of that. I am, I'm not.
Just make that argument because I'm telling you, you can yell back on Twitter at conservatives and say, maybe you paid for it, but it's not going to mean anything. All you're doing is continuing to say that this is represents some type of problem to this country. The idea that there's 3,000 or 4,000 people walking through Mexico right now is not a material threat to anybody.
I am fully aware of that. But
yes, stick with that.
The early voting is showing up, and the Republicans are showing up because they're fanatics.
Right. Yes.
This is what
so go out. But
polls.
yes, but you're not going to prevent that, are you? Your argument's not going to prevent it. So all I'm telling you is expend your energy and your anger towards something that is productive, because now is the time that you need to be productive. I appreciate the call. Your theory may have some merit, but it's not a useful one in the context of politics right now.
The chances are, if you're thinking about it, you're probably not spending enough time on Twitter.
All right, look, I'm sorry. We got to go. Let me take some IMs. I apologize. That debate thing went later than I wanted it to, longer, and we didn't even get to the part.
Don't demagogue it, Sam.
Train Boy, y'all need to check out the new escape room in Midwood, Brooklyn that is designed to mimic the experience of a Jewish family in Tsarist Russia trying to escape the pogroms.
No, thank you.
That is weird.
I'm going to connect with my ancestors at the Jew escape room.
Or not Jesus. Boy, we can't escape.
Negro Spiritual. And the number one reason I'm eagerly anticipating the midterms election, DJ Danarchy's inevitable drops in the blue wave. JB. Do the Middle Eastern people in the caravan from Central America have bone saws? If so, I'm scared. Garrett. The Washington Examiner broke the real MS-13 story. Here's a serious quote. One anonymous woman who moved her plants inside of her home out of MS-13 likened the city to a bomb about to explode. Here's the link to the story.
It produced an overwhelming sense of impending doom.
Ryan from California, a list of people Mike Pence considers possible terrorists, transgender people with Twitter accounts, his neighbor's swarthy gardener, men who don't call their wives mommy, and mommy who wear bras that don't have itchy labels, men who sit down with women they don't call mommy Michael. Ryan, I just saw this thing with Jesse Lee Peterson and David Pakman. I would not call it a debate because this guy's an idiot. I never heard of him before, but as a black man, hearing him through black stereotype after stereotype makes my blood boil. I see he's the type that provides the cover racists want but can't say out loud. If Uncle Ruckus and Samuel Jackson's character from Django had a baby, it would be Jesse Lee Peterson. Attorney Andrew, I'll save people a bunch of time on that hunt-a-killer game. It was Sam. The victim was Seth Rich, and the weapon was a bra. Jameel Smith is reporting that on leaked audio from a Brian Kemp campaign event where he expresses concern over Georgians exercising their right to vote. Interesting. We'll check that out. Ola, Sam, have you heard of Bo Burnham? He's also a comedian.
Member of our community just got.
Oh, watch his movie 8th Grade. I will. Drinkalicious. How did the pool go from Occupy to hanging out with Mike Cernovich? Oh, how did Tim Pool go from Occupy to hanging out with Mike Cernovich? Yeah. Sam's Tinder profile. Hey, girl, swipe right. Did you see me wipe the floor with Charlie Kirk on the banking rules in Dodd-Frank? Ain't I an alpha male? Marty, Sam, I thought you did a great job at Politicon. You've shown the best way to defeat someone that gish gallops you is to be very informed on the topic. It still tickles me thinking of Charlie saying deregulating coal was a good thing. Bullprog, Trump continued, while I'm at it, I care a lot, even the most, about preserving our social fabric, too. I guess I'm a socialist, too. Ooh, it's a dirty word, but I'll go ahead and say it. I'm a national socialist. California Uber Alles, can't wait for DJ Anarchy to edit Sam saying, I don't wear bras into the next fun half interlude. Mila Cedar, Mom, Dad's talking about bras again. Denver Dave, Ancient Greece was racist. Another side, love the show, heard the argument for 3 or 4 days at this point. Capitalism and racism in America are intricately linked. Jamie is right. Jermo,
that's what I said.
22.
That's literally what everybody said.
Sammy, Kurt Gross, his salary, $27,000 a year. Now let's find out what his penthouse apartment is worth. Do middle-class people live paycheck to paycheck? No. Colin from Nebraska, can Michael do a solved voice of Sam raging about the bras and itchy tags?
And they have these itches, and it hurts. It hurts the woman's back. So whatever you say about the larger bra industry, Charlie, there's itchy backs from the labels.
Chris Lapaco, I'm confused. Does Jamie think that if capitalism goes away, that racism will disappear?
No.
No. You're calling from, really cool. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's stuff is probably a pre-racist commandment, I'm guessing. 2 things about food stamps. Many workers remain eligible and reliant on SNAP, i.e. Walmart workers. People often lose their eligibility due to cuts and restrictions while continuing to need that assistance, though. That's true. All right, the final IM of the day. I lost my soundboard. Campaign Gumshoe Goy, campaign contributions records reveal Charlie Kirk lives at home with his parents. Do you think his mother asked him how his debate with you went? See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive